All right, hello, welcome to Thursday Speedrunner Spotlight if you're watching live, but gotta prepare in advance. I'll be busy this weekend actually running my own marathon, so if you're watching this right when this YouTube video goes up, it's probably still going on. There's my plug of the day. Now I can plug my guest. Welcome. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the stream.
How's it going? Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. I haven't been on a speedrun podcast in a while, and I haven't really done many in general, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn about PlayStation because nothing in here at all. So
Yeah,
I
there's a
need to have
lot for
someone
sure.
that actually knows what they're talking about to guide me through the process. So
Yeah, for sure.
figured you'd be a good person to do that task for me here. So
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. It's awesome to be here. I'm glad I was able to come on for sure.
yeah, thanks for being on. And yeah, we can start from the beginning, of course, which is what got you started with speedrunning.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm DylWingo. I've been speedrunning since about 2017. So I've been speedrunning for almost 7 years. I started I think the later half of 2017. Um,
August or October?
it was like September. It was like
Well, we
September.
started
September.
around the same time then.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like early October 2017,
Oh,
I think.
wow.
But I started
That's
watching in
crazy.
August, yeah.
Oh, wow. I actually started watching speedrunning in 2013. So I've been
Yeah, I
watching it
figured a lot
for
of people it was funny. I like found out about it and I was like, okay, I'm in immediately. So
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I started running in 2017, September 2017, but I started watching all the way back to like late 2013. I just got recommended videos on YouTube. It was Narcissa Wright's Ocarina of Time speedrun at the AGDQ 2013,
mhm.
and I don't know why I even clicked on it. I just clicked on it and I watched the game being beaten like 20 something minutes, and I was just like, what is this? And it was just I immediately right then and there I dove into the wormhole, and it was just I was starting to look up just so many games. um yeah, so I was for like a few years I was only just a Twitch viewer. I was watching just a bunch of like Nintendo runs like Banjo Kazooie, Ocarina of Time, Mario 64. And then I started to dive into the stuff that I grew up with, which is mainly PlayStation. So like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Ape Escape, like all those games. And yeah, so I was a mainly just a viewer for years, and I always wanted to try speedrunning, but I was always like, like a lot of other people, they're like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'll be good at it. You know, who knows what will happen. But I eventually, yeah, in 2017, I started actually learning the run. So my first run I did was Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, which is a platformer for the PlayStation 1. I did the 100% category on and off for a few years, and yeah, so that was my entry into speedrunning per se. So
Mhm. So Crash, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, again, like my PlayStation knowledge in general is bad, let
mhm.
alone the speedrunning scene because yeah, I was just always a Nintendo kid and
Yeah.
so that's just what I'm familiar with. So I actually here, let me grab it because last year I picked up a PlayStation 1. So I've got one here. I've never really used it because I'm waiting for I got specifically the model with that was the last like US release with the parallel port on the back, which you can
Oh,
use that
okay.
flash cart that plugs into the back of it.
Yeah, the
Uh
PSIO. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't been able to get one, of course. So this has just been collecting dust so far, but I do have it and eventually I want to use it. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I have a modded PS1 as well, but I have the X Station mod, so it's an internal
yeah,
mod.
yeah. I've heard
Um,
about a lot about that one, but it removes the
yeah,
disk drive though.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
like the thing with at least with mine is I have my PS2 to play PS1 discs. So I have a pretty big PS1 disc collection. But then the X Station's nice just for like casual games because I can just have everything. It's like an EverDrive essentially. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. The downside is it does remove the disk drive, but I mean at least I have one. And then um, they are making one eventually, because this X Station, I had to send it to somebody to get it modded because you have to solder stuff onto the motherboard and
Mhm.
do a bunch of stuff with like the CPU chip. But there's like a new version that's coming out eventually that'll actually be solderless and it'll just be like plug and play. And I think they're gonna eventually maybe try and work on one that'll not remove the disk drive. I hope, because I
Ooh.
would love that, because I'm a big physical media guy. So,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, I
yeah,
like
no,
being
that's
able to use
awesome.
it as a CD player. It's actually pretty good for it. And there's something
Yeah,
about it on the CRT too. I don't know. It's just fun.
yeah, and the PS1 just has that very like iconic, like the blue menu with like the little
Mhm.
colors. Like it's so iconic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I've been waiting for a PSIO, but I mean, I don't know if there'll ever be back in stock or whatever, or if I'm doing it
Yeah,
wrong. But yeah, that's got some soldering process. You got to send that in, even though
yeah,
that just plugs in the back. So
yeah.
it's a bit harder. Like the classic Nintendo consoles are nice because you just put a cartridge in. but but yeah, this is a
Yeah.
whole new world for me. So we'll
Oh
get there.
yeah, the fun stuff I can talk about with disc-based speedruns, because there's plenty of it.
Oh yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not used to the whole disc-based thing. I don't think I've ever done a speedrun on a disc-based game, because I've done Odyssey, but that's a cartridge, and that I even had
Mhm.
it installed digitally. So
Yeah, yeah, because usually
wow.
that's faster for like Switch speedruns, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I can't think of a single game I've ever done. I don't think I've ever done a disc speedrun. So that's very interesting. I never thought about it, but yeah, just hasn't worked out that way
Yeah, there's a lot of variables.
yet.
A lot. So
Yeah, I can only imagine because discs are a lot easier to like deteriorate over time, I think. And yeah, I don't know what the equivalent of like a cartridge tilt would be, but probably not good.
yeah, like the thing with disc-based speedruns is like there's a few things you have to keep in factor. For one thing is you got to obviously take good care of them.
Hmm.
Don't be rough with them, especially, and I can talk about this later with like with Final Fantasy VII, which is my main speedrun I've been doing in the last like few years. It's a multi-disc game, so like we do disc switching to like the next disc,
Oh,
and
that's
that's a big
right.
thing. Is yeah, so like with a game like that, when you're switching over to disc two, you got to do it fast. But for me, I still like am so gentle because like um, I don't want to scratch my discs and I don't want to ruin them. And I just want to make sure they stay in as perfect condition as possible so I can use them for as long as I can. But basically, yes, you just gotta handle them with care, take good care of them, keep them in the jewel case when you're not using them. Obviously, keep them. Don't leave them out of the case, or don't leave them in don't leave them out in the sun or any like terrible environmental conditions. But yeah, that's the benefit of being like a Nintendo speedrunner, especially with like NES, SNES, N64, is you could just have the EverDrive, and most people don't even remove the EverDrive; they just do your runs on the EverDrive, which is
That's
like,
what I started doing because, well,
yeah,
mainly because I got a AV Famicom, which has a different like pin connector layout on the bottom compared to
yeah,
the NES, and my converter stopped working, so it's just like, screw it,
uh,
I'll just use the EverDrive. So, but it's
yeah,
reading it the same exact way, so in my mind, there's no difference.
yeah. It's still like it's still reading the ROMs, like the ROMs the exact same from reading it off a cartridge,
Hmm.
and you're on original hardware anyway. And on top of that, like keeping the EverDrive in the console, you're not wearing your cartridge port because you're not
Hmm.
removing the flash card, putting the game card in, then putting the flash card back in, and vice versa. You can just keep it all in one,
Exactly. Yep.
and you don't have any problems. Yeah, so I definitely envy that with a lot of Nintendo speedrunners because yeah, like you don't get that. You don't get as much wear and tear on the actual console compared to like even PlayStation, even non Final Fantasy games. You gotta like open the disc drive, take a disc out, put another disc in, close it and all that stuff. But yeah, so definitely envious of that just a little bit, but
I understand.
yeah, maybe one day I'll run a Nintendo game and I won't feel as envious, but for now, no,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I didn't think about how some games, yeah, they have multiple discs, and guess that counts for the speedrun time, having to swap them.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So Final Fantasy VII, there's 3 discs. The
Wow.
like more than half of the run is on disc 1. And then like the later half is on disc 2, and then like the last like 20 plus minutes is on disc 3, because disc 3 is just the last dungeon. But yeah, disc swapping, it does count for like the RTA time, so that's included. So I some people don't, but I have a disc swap split. So if I like lose like a second or two on disc swapping, I actually know. But I like, some people have it, other people's don't. But I have one just because I want to see, like, and on occasion I'll be like, hey, I golded by 0.1 on the disc swap. Like, hey, I was 0.1 faster and I was still gentle, because I'm not trying to be rough with everything. But yeah, no, we do count that for the RTA time. And most like RPG PlayStation runs that have multi-disc will count. They'll count the disc swap. So
That's just very interesting. I didn't know that. So.
yeah,
I feel like usually we try to remove stuff like that, like for multiple games, speedruns. We like remove the swapping time because it's just there's so many variables, and the fastest way to do it now is to have an EverDrive and just load the next ROM. So it kind of
yeah,
be unfair in a way. I don't know. It's a whole mess.
yeah. No, because there's also like there's like multi Mario runs and stuff I've seen too. Like, and so you guys actually remove the time it takes to get to the next game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, because
It's
there's
a kind
even
of newer
like
change, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, because there's in the PlayStation community, there's like multi like Spyro and Crash runs,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm pretty sure I don't know. I haven't ran multi Crash and Spyro personally, so I don't know if they remove the time between games. I'll have to look into that, because they might, but they also I don't know. They might just go off pure RTA timing. I'm not 100% sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's honestly, that I can definitely see the benefit of removing that like time it takes to switch to other games, because definitely, because you want to get the three main times of each game, or whatever, how many games you're playing in total, to get that final time, and then having to switch between games and stuff. I can see why that doesn't count, for like a multi Mario run or multi Zelda or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very
Yeah, it's
cool.
just interesting the difference. I know it's a little different, but it's what I can relate it to in my mind, like a similarity with the
Mhm.
swapping of whatever you're doing. So I don't know,
Yeah.
just interesting because I've never been in that kind of situation. So it's like, oh, I guess yeah. I'm so used to everything just being either like digitally downloaded or all on one thing
Hmm.
or something. So I've never
Yeah.
had to deal with multi discs.
Yeah, it's a pain sometimes, but I like it also, because it makes PlayStation speedrunning unique in a way. So I hate it some days, and other days I'm like, this is really cool. So
Yeah, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the Famicom Disk System has a kind of you're supposed to like swap to a different side sometimes in their
yeah, I've
things.
seen that.
If you're on an EverDrive, though, it kind of does that for you.
Yeah, because it's funny you say that, because I went to Japan back in November, and I bought an AV Famicom, because
Hmm.
I never owned one, and I bought an EverDrive because I just wanted to play some NES games casually, and I was messing around with I played Zelda 1, like I played through the English NES version. I beat it, very good game, by the way. And then I wanted to look at the Famicom version, because I had it downloaded on, and the EverDrive Pro has the Famicom disk system built into it. And yeah, there's like the option that you can do like auto switch between like side A and side B for the Famicom disk system games only. That's really cool. That's, you don't have to manually do it; it just automatically does it for you.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's nice you got the AV Famicom because that has the extra audio that the FDS does, so you could get the unique sound experience that comes from the FDS version.
yeah, because the EverDrive, I've seen videos. The EverDrive, like the way it processes the Famicom disk system, the audio is a little bit off, compared to actually playing on like an actual Famicom
Yeah,
disk system.
a little
So I
bit,
didn't know that.
but yeah, it
Yeah.
can. It has that extra thing, so it sound. I think it's the same. I could be wrong, but it's definitely different than just the NES. Like the original EverDrive, like the NA that I had for the NES couldn't do that, I don't think.
Hmm.
But yeah, the AV Famicom with like the Pro definitely can because that's what mine does. So that's what I'm speaking from. So
Oh,
I
that's
don't know
awesome.
the technical stuff, but yeah, it has the extra sound quality that comes with it. So you have that
Wow.
option now, I guess.
Yeah, and I also want to. I haven't been able to in the past few weeks. I've been busy, but I'm trying to get RGB modded. I already found somebody that does the mod, but because I'm a really big quality buff. I play like on like component video and
Yeah.
RetroTink 5X upscaler and all that stuff. So I was playing off composite, and I was just like, oh, I need to get the RGB mod. And then when I was at AGDQ, and I saw some people that had the RGB mod, including hacks. I was just like, oh my god, it looks so good. I have to get this, and yeah, I've been meaning to send it off. It's like I literally have my Famicom packed up, and I've been meaning to just go to the post office and ship it. I just haven't had time lately. But yeah, no, I have to get that RGB mod because yeah, the component video on the NES and the Famicom, it just looks insane with it absolutely like, and I thought like PlayStation and stuff looked good, but like with 8-bit and 16-bit stuff, it just looks absolutely insane with seeing like every little pixel and stuff. So
yeah, the that GDQ sold me on the RetroTink because I've been playing off a CRT and just capturing it and then like just stretching the window up in my OBS. So obviously it's not the clearest picture with that method, but and my CRT has some warping on the side. So if I ever got like a monitor, it'd probably look a lot nicer for me. But yeah, the RetroTink would solve a lot of the issues I'm having right now because I still have to use Amarek and custom drivers, and yeah, you can imagine. Ugh,
yeah,
so
yeah,
we'll get there eventually, but yeah.
Yeah, I used to use Amarek when I used to use the GV USB 2 back in the day.
Yeah, that's
and
a big one.
Yeah, and I hated using Amarek, and I adopted an upscaler in 2019. So like I was like one of the, I wouldn't say first, but I was definitely an early adopter. Yeah, because I went to AGDQ 2019. I saw the OSSC at the time because they didn't RetroTink. I don't even think was out at that point, or it might have been just not the 5X. And I saw the OSSC and I played on it a bit. And I came back from GDQ. I did research on it, and I finally bought one. And then I didn't even get to use it until like the summer because I didn't even have a monitor. I was still playing on a CRT. So then I switched over the summer of 2019, and I literally have not used a CRT since. I think I had to use the CRT for like a week or so, like back in like 2021 when like I was having cap card issues. But yeah, no, I play off. I literally have used the same monitor since 2019. I just use like a Asus 1 millisecond monitor, and my current setup is so I got the OSS. I had the OSSC from 2019 and 2021, and then in 2021 the RetroTink 5X came out, and I was like one of the first. I was part of the first batch, so I ordered one immediately, and the RetroTink 5X is just insane. Like it's like one of the best things you can have for a retro game setup, whether you're speedrunning or whether you're not. The quality is just crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know when I could get a monitor, so, but I'd want to get one at least just for the capture quality on the stream to be clearer, because I could still just, instead of running it through the thing just to my capture card, I could do it through the RetroTink and then to my capture card. Because then instead of using the component on my capture, I could use the HDMI, and that would again eliminate the whole Amarek thing.
Yep.
And then I could do it straight in OBS and solves a lot of issues that way. And then yeah, if I ever got a monitor, then ooh, fancy. So
yeah,
I'm definitely eyeing it. That's for sure.
Yeah, like playing off a CRT is nice, and like I did when I was at GDQ, I did because they had a CRT for the first few days. I couldn't find it after a while, but
they've been getting rid of them very slowly.
Yeah,
I've noticed.
Yeah, they had a Trinitron that had component video, and I actually got to play off it. And like, I still have a CRT. It's in my closet. But like the problem with CRTs is just they're so clunky, they're so big, they just cause a lot of headache with the setup.
This one's
but, like,
27 inches.
Oh,
and has component. It's like 150 pounds or something. So yeah.
Jeez.
There it is.
Yeah, like, man, like having the CRT is nice because again, like you still get that like old school feel, and especially when you have one that has component, it just looks amazing. But the whole thing with the monitor is it still looks good. It's more convenient, takes up less space, and then like you said, being able to capture with HDMI, it just eliminates so many headaches with Amarek and audio and everything. Because I've been capturing off HDMI since I started my upscaler setup, and yeah, it's just way easier and you have everything on one. It's incredible. So
yeah. Well, there's the retro quality talk of the day. I feel like
Hmm.
that's a daily or a weekly occurrence, I should say, with these. Because, yeah, I am a big nut when it comes to all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, same here. Same here.
yeah, I've noticed that a lot of people kind of that have been around a while kind of gravitate towards a lot of that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, but anyway, trying to get back into the timeline of events here. You said you started with Crash 2, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you can just talk me through kind of why that speed run's cool, I guess. I don't know much about it, so.
Yeah. So I haven't ran Crash 2 since 2019, because it was my first speed game, and then ever since then I kind of branched down to other things. Like now I'm doing Final Fantasy 7, which is an RPG, which is way
Mhm.
different from Crash. But yeah, Crash Bandicoot was a series I grew up with. It was one of the first PlayStation games I ever played, and also one of the first video games I ever played. So yeah, it's a 3D platformer, but more so a 3D platformer on rails. So it's a very linear game. So literally point A to point B. It's like kind of like Super Mario 3D World in a way, but a little bit more linear.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so with Crash 2, that was one of the speedruns I actually started watching. I believe in 2014, I started actually watching like Crash 2 and Crash 3 speedruns. And so with Crash 2, um, first of all, the most jank thing ever is the optimal version is actually the PAL version,
Oh.
which is just
That's
yeah. So
backwards.
yeah, so the PAL version is optimal because NTSC and PAL. So NTSC is obviously in North America, South America, and then Japan. PAL is everywhere else, so like Europe,
Mhm.
Australia, New Zealand, wherever. And then PAL is 50 hertz, NTSC 60 hertz. So Naughty Dog, the developers of Crash Bandicoot, for all the Crash games, to compensate for the frames players would lose playing on the PAL version. So like Crash in NTSC is 30 FPS, in PAL it's 25. But for every Crash game, for Crash 1, 2, and 3, they actually sped up Crash's movements in the game. And then so not only does he run faster, he slides longer distances and he jumps higher.
Hmm.
So and it's funny because you'd think with that all Crash games are optimal on PAL. No, it's just Crash 2. Crash 1 and Crash 3 are optimal on NTSC. Crash 2 is optimal on PAL
Okay.
because so the movement in the game is called neutral slide spinning. So what you do is you hold any direction and you press circle or R1 to slide. And if you let go of the direction and you perform a spin, you'll actually spin with slide speed. So
Hmm.
normally if you slide into a spin like a slide spin, you'll slow down. But if you let go of the direction and spin, you'll maintain that speed. So you do neutral slide spinning, and so on the PAL version, your neutral slide spin is not only faster, but it's longer distance than NTSC. So you move way faster in the PAL version, and then again, you also jump higher. So a lot of we have another movement tech called glitch high jumps. Glitch high jumps are essentially you slide and spin into a jump, and on the PAL version, your height is just way up there compared to NTSC.
Hmm.
So a lot of like small skips in levels are easier on PAL, but then again, you move faster on PAL, and the game is just like it's minutes saved compared to NTSC. And then NTSC also the NTSC version, so you have a Crash can perform a body slam to break like a radius of crates because in especially in 100% in the 100% speed run you have to get all 25 crystals, get every single gem. So you get gems from secret areas, then also you get gems from breaking every box in every level. So um, you need all crystals, all gems, and then obviously beat all the bosses. So Crash's body slam on the NTSC version is actually broken. I think it was misprogrammed. So the body slam is supposed to just break everything in Crash's general radius, but on the NTSC version, it'll only break like one or two crates when you're supposed to be breaking like six or seven of them in your distance. But on the PAL version and on the NTSCJ version, they actually fixed it. So on the
Hmm.
PAL version, it's the proper body slam radius that you're actually supposed to have in the game. Um, but yeah, so Crash 2 is optimal on PAL. I started watching runs like again 2014. And then I started looking into eventually years later I was like maybe I want to try speedrunning. So I I already knew that, like, because at the time there were no upscalers, so getting PAL stuff in the States and also being able to display it properly was very
Yeah.
troublesome unless you had either a PVM monitor, which those were already starting to get expensive, or some other means. So I got, I don't know how I found it, but I found this like tiny like 12-inch monitor off eBay, or maybe it's a little bit bigger than that, from Greece, and it said it played NTSC and PAL. So I bought it for like $50. It came, and I plugged, like, I had gotten a PAL PS2, I got a PAL copy of the game, plugged it in, and it worked. I was like, oh, cool, I can actually play PAL. And the funny thing is, it was a monitor, like a small dinky monitor, but it had like very little input delay. So I was like, I can actually work with this. It felt pretty good. I just played with composite, but yeah, so I used that for a little while, and yeah, importing PAL stuff was just before the upscaler days. It was like nowadays it's way easier because upscalers, you can just, if you have an upscaler, you can play PAL stuff like very easily. But like back in 2017, when there was like when OSSC wasn't, I don't think, was around, and there were no RetroTinks, it was way harder. So I played off that for a little bit, and then obviously I also had to import a European PS2, European copy of the game, which that costed a lot of money. So yeah, I got all that, started speedrunning it, and then in 2018, the world record holder at the time, Super Boom Fan, he had a like a CRT TV that was a multi-system CRT, so it had NTSC and PAL, and he sent me this website that he got it off of. And it was this like really sketchy, I forget what the website's called, but they said they had CRTs that played NTSC and PAL, and I actually ordered one off. I think it was like a Toshiba or a Panasonic. It might have been a Panasonic. Off this website. They were apparently based in Chicago, in the States. So, and he ordered one and said it was fine. So I ordered one. I think I paid like $250 for a multi-system CRT. It came to me in like a week, and it arrived at my front door in like this super beat up and sketchy box.
Mm.
And I brought it up to my room, I unboxed it, and it was there, and it worked like perfectly. So I ended up in 2018, for the next like year or so, I actually switched to, I was able to finally play PAL stuff on a CRT. So I actually had a PAL CRT as in my setup, which was awesome. And yeah, it worked. It was used, but it worked fine, and it was able to, I had full color and everything, and it worked with NTSC stuff as well. I was just like, okay, this is very interesting. But
Well,
yeah,
perfect.
yeah. So yeah, so getting the PAL setup was just a pain in the butt. And then finally in 2019, I got an OSSC, and then the rest is history. But yeah, so but yeah, going back to the Crash speedrun, yeah, I was just very hooked. I was very hooked on the game because, you know, it was a childhood series I grew up with. The movement tech fascinated me. It was, at the time, the world record was like 1 hour 9 minutes 59 seconds. So I was like, okay, it's not too long of a speedrun to get into. And yeah, I started. I actually, when I was first doing runs, my internet, I had really bad internet. Like I had like not even a megabyte of upload. So for the first like several months I was speedrunning, I didn't stream. I couldn't stream.
Yeah.
I did all my. What's up?
I was agreeing. Like, yeah, there's no way you could stream on that.
Yeah. So I couldn't stream. I had Discord and stuff. So like I had Discord, and I was interacting in the community, but couldn't stream. I couldn't live stream or Twitch or anything. I had to record all of my runs locally. All my attempts and all of my runs were done locally. And then if I got a PB, I would have to like go to my college with my laptop and upload the PV to YouTube on the college Wi-Fi. I'm not even kidding. That's what I did for the first few months of speedrunning. I literally did that over and over again. So because I couldn't stream.
I admire the dedication.
Yeah, it was really jank, but I mean it worked. Like it was just my only option I could do at the time. So yeah, so I had to do offline runs and just tell people I PB'd. And then finally in April of 2018, we upgraded the internet in the house, and I actually was able to stream finally, and it felt good because like I actually had I already had people watching me because I was already doing runs and uploading to YouTube and talking to Discord. So I already had an audience, which was awesome because a lot of times when you start speedrunning, a lot of times you won't have an audience right away. It takes time to build up, but I already had people I knew. I had friends. So I already had an audience. I think when I started, I averaged like 10 viewers a stream, which was fantastic because I was just like,
That's
wow,
really good.
yeah, I didn't expect to actually get an audience right away, but it was like, again, I had already established myself, so um, yeah, I was finally able to do my runs. I didn't have to upload to the school Wi-Fi. I can actually upload at home and not worry about anything. But yeah, so I ran Crash 2 yeah, on and off from 2017 to 2019. And yeah, over the years, I ended up at the time, my final time before I stopped the running the game. Well, it was second place at the time, so I got second place on Speedrunner.com. Nowadays, I think I'm still top 10, which is really cool. My PB is a 1:11:45, I believe. But yeah, at the time it was second place. Nowadays it's still top 10, which is cool. But yeah, so I speedrun that, and it was just a really cool game. A lot of movement tech. The shoutouts to a lot of my close friends that I still talk to today are from the Crash community, and some of them still run Crash, some of them don't run Crash anymore, but most of my close friends I still talk to are from the Crash community. So the Crash community definitely helped me get started with what I do now. And yeah, the Crash series though, very cool speedruns. Again, lots of cool movement tech, a few skips here and there in levels, and then yeah, the completion categories are just usually the more popular ones because they're the longest, and also they have some of the cooler strats. And you have to, and, you know, especially if you're into like collecting in-game items and stuff. They're very fun to watch, and they're definitely the most competitive of the bunch for the Crash series. Um, but yeah, so Crash, yeah, that was my first game, and yeah, it was a very fun speed run. I definitely invested a lot of time into it, especially don't know how I did it during college, but hey, you
Invested
make
a lot
time
of money into it too.
yeah, yeah. And
That's what
at the time, I was actually working at a grocery store part time, so I wasn't working full time like I am now. So like I just any money I had, I still save my money pretty frequently, but any money I had, especially back then, I would barely spend anything. Like I would barely do anything. So if I had money, even for the retro tink, like at the retro tink, I got that 2021. It was like almost $300. I was like, I barely spent anything. I can just buy this, and I put a big dent in my account, but hey, you know, it worked. But yeah, no, I definitely invest a lot of money, and but that's speedrunning. You know, it's a hobby. You're gonna especially with like quality stuff and games and consoles, you're gonna invest money, and what's most important is as long as you get the enjoyment out of it, and as long as you get the fulfillment, that's all that matters. You know, money comes and goes. Do the things that make you happy. That's how I like to live my life. So yeah, do things that make you happy, and you know, obviously worry about money when you can, but if you know, you can afford to buy some things here and there for your hobby and make the hobby more enjoyable. But yeah.
Amen. Definitely get it. Something I found interesting. You said the record holder was Super Boom fan, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because I know him from Lost Levels and Sonic 2. What?
Yeah.
Does he just know how to do everything?
Yeah, I think he originally started with Crash, and then he eventually, because I think when I joined the community, he was doing Lost Levels, but kind of like as a side project. But yeah, he eventually, I think, ventured out into Sonic and stuff. But yeah, I think he does like multiple different. I haven't talked to him in forever. It's been like years, but
yeah, I knew him from Warpless D4 specifically of the Lost Levels, so the SNES version. I don't remember if he had the record. I know he was like not even a second off of it at one point. So
yeah,
and
I think he
had the Sonic 2 record. I remember that too, and I'm like,
yeah,
what a wild like. They're so different. I don't know how you can do that. I play 2D Mario's.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Some speedrunners they can just play different games and different genres and just adapt. It's crazy. But yeah, because I do remember when I started, he was running Lost Levels on and off, and at the time I think he got like second place or something, or third place in Warpless D4. And then yeah, I know eventually he moved into Sonic speedrunning, which I'm way more familiar with Mario runs than I am with Sonic runs. I barely know anything about Sonic runs.
I know a little about Sonic 2 specifically, which is what he happened to do. So that's why my mind went to it. But it's just funny. He did like the trifecta. It had Nintendo, Sega, and Sony.
Yeah.
It's just really funny to think about.
Gotta run Xbox to make it the quad, right?
Yeah, what's on X? Well, Halo, I guess. But
yeah.
You can do that Halo, on PC now, so I don't know.
Yeah. Does that even count? Yeah, but Yeah, no, it's crazy how people can run multiple things at a time. Absolutely.
And just so different as well. Just very
Oh
interesting.
yeah.
Literally every different, not just a different game, not just different console, different like manufacturer. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's just really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
But yeah, so where were we after Crash 2, I think?
Yeah, so after Crash 2, I started to like it was actually during Crash 2. I think it was like late 2017 or early 2018. I started to actually look into another speedrun. So it was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for the PS1, which is another PS1 PlayStation game.
Okay.
I'm not really into Harry Potter anymore these days. But
Yeah.
at the time, yeah,
Yeah.
you can kind of imagine why. But
Yeah.
yeah, at the time, at the time I was a big fan of Harry Potter. And then also, the PS1 Harry Potter game was one of the games I grew up with as well. And I saw at the time there was a runner named the Red Hot BR. He's from Brazil and he runs Crash games. I don't know if he still does. Another person I haven't talked to in years, but he had the world record for Harry Potter PS1, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, any percent. And I was like, I looked at the run, and so the Harry Potter game, it's I don't know if you call it like a platformer. It's kind of like it's one of those like movie games, but it's there's platforming elements in the game. There's puzzles. It has a variety of things. And I looked at the speed run, and the speed run was like super broken. There's like several big skips in the game they did to skip like major portions of the game, and I was like, this looks really cool. So I think it was like December of 2017. I did like 2 runs without the skips because I didn't learn. I just didn't. I wanted to see if I would like the run. Um, so I did the run without skips, and I was like, all right, I'll actually learn the skips. And then in early 2018, I started to learn the skips. And yeah, so in Harry Potter, there's like several big skips we do in the game. The big one, like there are a lot of like out of bounds tricks. So you'll line up like Harry in like a corner. You'll do this like weird walking movement, and you'll do a bunch of pause buffers and then clip out. It's very jank. It's a very broken game. And then yeah, so I started doing runs of that, and I was streaming finally because again I had internet in 2018. And then actually, I forget when, but it was sometime in 2018. I was grinding Harry Potter because like Harry Potter was kind of like my side game when I wouldn't want to run Crash, so I just do Harry Potter. It was similar length, but way easier and way less strenuous on your hands. So I started grinding it, and then I got my time down in like the like I almost like quarter 3 because I'm thinking of work, but in like September October-ish of 2018, I got my time down. I believe it was like third or second place because like the world record at the time was like a 115 or 116, and I got my time down to like a high 116. I was like, okay, I can actually maybe get a world record. So I started grinding it a little bit more, and then lo and behold, I got my first ever speedrun world record, which was in Harry Potter PS1 in 90%, in like 2018. And so at the time I think it was like a low 115, like a high 115 or a low 116. But yeah, I got my first world record, and that was really cool because like I had never had a world record in anything, in even Crash, and it was just awesome. It felt really cool. And then so myself and a few other the top runners, we were grinding it on and off for like the next few months, and then in 2019 AGDQ, I actually ran into a guy named Nitrovsky who he's been around the PlayStation speedrunning community since like 2013. Like he's been around like for over 10 years. Like really old runner. But I met him at AGDQ 2019, and I was like, yeah, you ran Harry Potter because he ran Harry Potter like back in like 2015 or 2016. And he's like, yeah, I haven't ran in a while. What's changed? I was like, I'll show you the run. So I did a run for him at AGDQ because it's an hour, 16 minutes. And he's just like, you know what? I haven't done runs of this in forever. Can you teach me the skips? I was like, yeah, of course. Because at the time when he was running the game, there were no big skips. There was barely any glitches that were found. He ran the game mostly glitchless. So I taught him everything at GDQ. And I think his PB at the time was like a 140 something, because again, it had no skips. He did right after I taught him everything, he did a run at GDQ, just timed it, didn't record anything. He got like a 120 something. I was like, oh my God, like that's crazy. So he actually was like, yeah, I'm going to go back and I'm actually going to speedrun again. Because he actually took like a long break from speedrunning, because I think from work and college and stuff. So he came back, we came back from AGDQ, and he's grinding Harry Potter, and he actually gets close to world record. I'm like, oh shoot, like I gotta actually lower the time. So I lowered the world record a little bit, and then he actually got world record like so quickly. I was like, oh my god, like that's crazy. Like he got world record like so fast, and I think he got like a mid 115, and then he like not even like days later, he lowered it all the way down to like a low 114. I was just like, oh shoot, like I didn't even know, no one knew that was even possible at the time. He just like he found some like strat optimizations and found some faster ways to do things. It was crazy because at the time, like when I had world record, we thought like it was almost close to optimized, but we were wrong. Like because speedrunning, you'll always find something new, even if it's something small. But he found like small optimizations that just added up, and yet he got it was like a 114 2x or something. And I remember I told myself, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna beat that. Like I don't know if I can beat that. So I think I did a grinding for a few days. I ended up getting, it was like 2 a.m. I ended up getting a 114 4x or something. So I was like, okay, I got a 114. I think I can get world record. And then so I grinded for like another week or two. I did some streams. I had some chokes, and then there was one night where I stopped streaming after like 3 hours. I was like, all right, I'll take a break. I'll do maybe 1 or 2 offline attempts, just because I felt like playing. And I did like the first offline attempt I did, I got a 114.06, and I beat the world record. I actually got world record back, and it was crazy. Like I was offline, but like I popped off, and I was just like so happy. And I posted in the Discord. I was like, oh my god, I actually got it back, and it was so close to a 113, and it was crazy. And Nitrovsky was like, oh my god, I can't believe you actually did it. And he was like, he still speedruns now, but he does mainly Spyro runs, like Spyro the Dragon. But yeah, so he's really happy, and everybody's really happy. And then I kind of left that game for a while because I was like, I don't know if anybody's gonna beat that. If anybody will, it'll be Nitrovsky. But Nitrovsky, I think he was just done at that point. He just got kind of bored, I think, with the game. And then I left at that for like, I think like half a year, and then I eventually came back to the game, and I got no one had gotten no one had beaten my time, no one had gotten a new world record. I still had world record. So I came back in like the later half of 2019. I got the first 113, and then I wanted to get like a lower 113. So then I grinded a little bit more, and then I ended up getting in like close to the end of 2019. I ended up getting like a 113 2x, and I was like, okay, that's a really good run. Like I'll take it, whatever. It had mistakes, but I don't think anybody's gonna beat this for a long time. So then fast forward to 2020, and there's another runner named Raging Redneck. He's one of my good friends. He had world record in Harry Potter before I did. He was actually the person I took it from originally. He grinds the game on and off. So he actually ended up starting to grind for world record again. And he actually, I was watching him. This was like actually when COVID like first started. This is like the beginning of the pandemic. We were all wearing masks and stuff, and I was at work. The cool thing about the pandemic was at my job at the grocery store. My job, I had to actually end up, because I was usually in the store, but I actually had to move to the back, and I had to like package stuff all day, every day. So it was perfect because I got to watch Twitch every single shift, which was fantastic. But yeah, so he started grinding Harry Potter for world record, and then he ended up getting the world record like after like a few, maybe like 2 months of grinding. He finally got it, and I remember he had a lot of close calls and stuff. And yeah, he got like a 113 like 1x, I think, like a 113 1x. And then so fast forward, at this time I'm actually running a different game, so I'm speedrunning Ratchet and Clank, Going Commando, which I'll talk about that later. But I'm speedrunning Ratchet and Clank. ESA had submissions for the remote marathon because it was the pandemic. I submitted Ratchet and Clank and Harry Potter, and I actually got both of them in. I got both of them in ESA 2020 in the marathon. So I was like, oh my god, this is awesome. So I was ecstatic. I got, I was running Ratchet and Clank at the time, so I got that in, and then I got Harry Potter in as well. So I was like, oh my god, I'm running 2 games at the marathon. That's crazy. So naturally, you'd think, I'm gonna derust, like, I'll derust both of them, and I'll be fine. So what ended up happening was I was grinding Ratchet and Clank hardcore. I didn't practice Harry Potter at all. Like, I didn't touch the game. I didn't even think about it. I procrastinated it for like the longest time, and then literally the day of because my Harry Potter run was like I think one day, and then the next day was my Ratchet run. And obviously Ratchet I didn't need a D-Rust because I was already running at the time. But Harry Potter I was like, I haven't like touched the game since like late 2019. So I woke up early that day, like because my run wasn't until the nighttime. I started like de-rusting and practicing the skips and stuff and everything. I did everything, and then I did one resetless run right before my ESA run. I did one resetless run. I got like a mid 114, which is like a minute and a half, or like a little over a minute off my PB. I was like, hey, you know what? That's good enough. That's good enough for D-Rust, whatever. So we get into ESA, and Redneck is actually on commentary with my other friend Rico. Redneck's on commentary with me because he's the world record holder. I want to have him on. The ESA run happens, and I'm not even kidding. I get world record back in the marathon, not playing the game for months. Yeah, I got the record back in ESA. So I ended up getting the final time. It was 1:13:02. So it was 3 seconds off from a 1:12. Yeah, so I got the world record back. I remember I was just like, it was crazy because during the run, like I was thinking the whole time, I was just like, I didn't even have like a timer. I was just thinking, I was like, this run has been really good. Like the skips have gone quickly. I haven't messed up anything major. There's RNG in the run and like mid runs. Like I had okay-ish RNG. I was like, this feels like a good run. And then so the end of the run, there's like the final boss. There's like a pretty difficult strategy you need to do to kill him in one cycle. And I remember I took my headphones off because like I need to concentrate on this. I got the one cycle, and then the rest of the boss is really easy. And I remember the final. I think the ESA's timer was messed up. It said like 1:12:58, but I went back and retimed it. It was 1:13:02. It was a new world record. I remember I was so shocked. I was like, oh my god, like when does this ever happen? Like on top of I haven't played the game in months. So I did half a day of practice, including one resetless run. I get world record back, and that world record literally stood for another like year. It stood like for another year. Like Redneck, I think he just didn't feel like grinding the game at the time. And yeah, that's my last PB of that game I've done, which is the ESA run. It's still third place, which is even funnier. It's still top 3. The world record now, I think it's like a 1:12:4x. So it's a really good run. Redneck, I think, has second place. But yeah, the world record holder, his name is Flo. He's from France. But yeah, I haven't ran the game since ESA. One, because I just felt like that was a cool run to leave off of, because it's like, hey, you're not gonna beat that in terms of getting a world record in a marathon. On top of obviously, J.K. Rowling, she's a terrible person, and just with all the controversy surrounding her and stuff, I don't want to bother with Harry Potter anymore. So
that's fair.
Yeah. And it kind of stinks because it was a big part of my childhood, but like the problem though is like when you do, especially consume the new media, it indirectly supports her. So I can't do that personally anymore. I still talk to because the Harry Potter community, the speedrunning community, is filled with amazing people. I still talk to some of them pretty frequently, but in terms of running the games and being involved in Harry Potter, I'm just not personally involved anymore. Because again, J.K. Rowling, she's just the awful view she has, and so unfortunately, but it's a cool part of my speedrunning history, and I definitely, it's cool to look back on, and again, like it's cool to leave that game on like a high note, like getting a world record in a marathon, especially during a global pandemic. So like that's.
Can I have your Rust, please? That'd be great.
Yeah, so yeah, it was a cool part of my speedrunning experience and my speedrunning my timeline. And again, like I said, don't run the game anymore, but it was a cool run. My run's still third place. That's cool to still think about. And yeah, I met some amazing people. I still talk to some of them. And yeah, so that was my second game that I ran like in depth, like actually grinded, and did serious attempts of. But yeah, so yeah, that was from late 2017 to mid 2020. So yeah,
good amount of time.
Yeah, it was like on and off too. It was like Crash, like because I'm not constantly grinding games. I kind of just I tend to just be inactive for a few months, and then I'll grind for a few months and then be inactive. I tend to do that, and I basically have done that this whole time. I'm not constantly grinding. I'll go through periods of not speedrunning, and then I'll go through periods where I am speedrunning. So
Fair, fair.
yeah,
It's nice to have those breaks sometimes. So,
yeah, absolutely,
but yeah,
absolutely.
sounds like Ratchet and Clank was next.
Yeah, so Ratchet and Clank. Ratchet and Clank again. It's another game I grew up with, and this is actually the last of my speedruns that I grew up with. The other two games that I ran, I literally didn't even play them until I was an adult. But yeah, Ratchet and Clank. It's a PlayStation platformer, like Crash Bandicoot, but it's for the PlayStation 2. And then what's nice actually is for PlayStation 1 speedruns, we actually speedrun. So for PlayStation 1 games, we actually speedrun it on a PlayStation 2 Slim because the PlayStation 2 Slim, PlayStation 2s are actually backwards compatible with PlayStation 1 games. So you can play all your PS1 games on a PS2, all your discs and everything. The PlayStation 2 actually has in the console itself, like in the settings, there's a setting called fast disk speed. For some reason, when you activate this, it's not for PlayStation 2 games, it's for PlayStation 1 games. So PlayStation 1 games will actually load faster if you have this setting enabled. So for most PlayStation 1 speedruns, you speedrun on a PlayStation 2. So you speedrun because, again, it's backwards compatible. It's still official hardware, but you speedrun it because you save minutes just based off loads, just for having that setting turned on. So yeah, for Crash and Harry Potter, I already had a PS2. I had a European one for Crash, but then for Harry Potter, I had an American one because the American version was fastest. So for Ratchet and Clank, it's a PlayStation 2 game, so I had a PS2 already. And then again, Ratchet and Clank, it's a platformer from the makers of Spyro the Dragon, but it was on PlayStation 2. It's actually still around today. Ratchet and Clank, they still the latest Ratchet and Clank game came out in 2021 on the PS5. So it's a series that's been around for a long time. It's actually one of PlayStation's longest running series that's still around. So yeah, I actually never expected to run Ratchet and Clank. It was one of those games where it always looked cool, but I was just like, yeah, I don't know if I'll ever run that. I don't really care for it. But then in 2019, in late 2019, I don't know what happened. I started to get very interested into it, and then one of my close friends now, his name's Mantodia. He was a regular viewer of mine in my Crash streams, and I didn't even know he speed ran until one day I found him on Twitch recommended. And I clicked into his profile. I was like, I didn't even know you speed ran or streamed. He's like, oh yeah, I speed run Ratchet and Clank. Oh, that's so cool. So I actually started to slowly watch Ratchet and Clank runs because again, I grew up with Ratchet and Clank, and I think on and off I watched Ratchet and Clank runs over the years. I think back in when I was getting into speedrunning, before I got into it, I think in 2016, 2017. Another who's one of my close friends nowadays, Zem92. He's also been around forever. He was running Ratchet and Clank back then. He still runs it now, and I'd watch his streams, but on and off. I wasn't super invested. And same thing with the Rixer, another PlayStation really good, really close friend of mine, but he's an old boy. He's been around forever. He still runs, but yeah, he ran Ratchet and Clank. So I watched Ratchet and Clank years ago, but I wasn't ever super invested into it. I would just have it on in the background. I'd watch it here and there, just to see what it was like. But other than that, I wouldn't track it in depth. But then I started to get more interest into it, and I don't know what it was in late 2019. So Ratchet and Clank, it's a 3D platformer like Crash, but it's less linear. So I guess you can kind of think of it like Ratchet and Clank games. They have a linear path in the level, but they're more open space levels, kind of like Super Mario 64 in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like that. But there are linear paths. So usually Ratchet and Clank, they're open levels, but then you'll have several different paths you can take. And so with Ratchet and Clank, the first 3 games are on the PS2, and there's broken movement tech in that game as well as Crash. So that's what naturally drew me into the Ratchet and Clank series. With Ratchet and Clank 2 specifically, I was just really invested into watch some Mantodia, again, my friend that I didn't know streamed until later that year. He was running New Game Plus at the time, and New Game Plus, the New Game Plus categories, and I was watching him for a little bit. I was like, yeah, this seems cool and stuff, but like maybe there'd be some another category that's cooler. And then Zem, who I had originally watched like years ago, he actually started grinding a category called all platinum bolts. So in the Ratchet and Clank games, in most Ratchet and Clank games, so the main currency in the game are like nuts and bolts, and you'll use that to buy like weapons, ammo, to progress in the story, whatever. But in the game, in most Ratchet and Clank games, there are 40 collectible bolts, and they'll either be like gold, platinum, silver, whatever, um, or titanium. And so those collectible bolts will unlock like special in-game cheat codes and secret like areas and stuff or whatever. And then so for the Ratchet and Clank games, for most Ratchet and Clank games, there's the New Game Plus categories because Ratchet and Clank games offer a New Game Plus option where you get to keep all your equipment, keep all your weapons. You start the new game, it's a little bit harder. You have all your equipment and stuff, like like most New Game Plus games. But then there's also obviously the 80% categories, which is what I'm more interested in because I don't really care for New Game Plus stuff. Because you start from a fresh file, you start from new game. It's a legit legit vanilla experience. Yeah, so the Ratchet and Clank games, they have 80% categories, but then they also have the all platinum bolts categories, which are 80% categories, but you also have to collect all 40 collectible bolts. So yeah, Zem at the time, he was grinding. He started to grind all platinum bolts, which was the Ratchet and Clank 2 special bolts category, equivalent to the bolt categories for Ratchet and Clank. And I started watching him. He was grinding in like late 2019. I don't know why. I started to get really interested into that run because it was just so cool. The movement tech, there's like in level skips you can do, the strategy, like the strats and everything. It was just so cool. And so I got very hooked, and I was just like, maybe I can. I ran Crash, I ran a platform. Maybe I can run this too. So I started messing around with I replayed the game from scratch. I just casually because I hadn't played it in years, just to familiarize with it. And then I started to actually look at some of the strats for Ratchet and Clank 2, and then I joined the Discord. I started asking a bunch of questions, and I even asked, I was like, hey, I haven't ran a Ratchet and Clank game before. I want to run Ratchet and Clank 2. What's the best starter category? And then people actually unanimously said, oh, New Game Plus, because you learn the movement foundations and all that stuff. But I just didn't have any interest in New Game Plus because frankly, it looked boring. I was just like, it's just it's way shorter. You don't really get much helipack and thruster pack movement because Ratchet has Clank on his back, which Clank's like a robot. He can basically be like a jetpack or like a levitator pack. And you didn't have that in New Game Plus. You only had Ratchet because again the movement tech. I'll go over that in a little bit. It's just very broken. But people unanimously told me, "Oh, run New Game Plus." But then I started just. I talked with other people in the community. I talked with a few other of my friends, including Manto, and then my other friend Plecto, who was actually running all platinum bolts at the time. And they're just like, "Dude, just run all platinum bolts. Like, you don't have to run NG Plus. You can run that as your first category, and you'll be fine." So I started to just like mess around with the movement tech in the game, and the movement tech in Ratchet and Clank. So there's actually it's pretty complicated, but I'll try to be as short as possible. So Ratchet and Clank, starting with the second one, there's an item called the charge boots. So you don't have to get them, but they're in like a secret part of the game. In Ratchet and Clank 2, you get them from winning a race on hover bikes, and the charge boots actually you double tap R1 and Ratchet will just like thrust forward. But with the charge boots, it's like there's so much you can do with that movement tech. So with the charge boots, you can charge, you can spam the wrench and then do like a long jump. You can do what's called proxies, where if you charge into a wall and you use the decoy glove, it'll just be thrusted up. So like Ratchet charges, you use the decoy glove as you collide into the wall, and you'll just go up the wall. So there's just like a ton of different things you can do with the charge boots, and that's what really got me hooked on the Ratchet and Clank speedrun. So I started just messing around with the charge boot tech. I started messing around with, again, like the Clank movement, which is like the helipack and the thrust pack, because you don't get the charge boots until like about 30-ish minutes into the run. So the first 30 minutes of the run, you only have Ratchet and Clank, and so you can only basically just do like long jumps. And then we also have we do these forward side flips. We call them macaronis because Ratchet like kind of he kind of curls into like a macaroni shape as he flips forward. So the early game movement tech is very basic, but still, even with the early game movement tech, I really liked it because like any speed run, optimizing it and getting like proper lines and everything, it just added up. So I was very hooked. I was very hooked on the movement tech. I was really interested in the game and just getting good at it. Learning the movement tech, and then also the skips, and then also with the, like I mentioned earlier, the decoy glove that you could use to do the proxies. You could also use the decoy glove to clip out of bounds. So literally, if you go up near a wall, you go into first person mode and you deploy a decoy above Ratchet's feet. A lot of times you can literally just clip out of bounds. So a lot of this, and they still do it in the current route. A lot of Ratchet and Clank is just, again, charge movement. You clip out of bounds, and you just do a bunch of crazy stuff. So yeah, I started messing around with the game in 2019, and then I did my first runs in January of 2020, so right before COVID. I didn't have much time because at the time I was commuting to college, university. I was commuting, I think, 4 days a week, and university from my house was like about an hour away. So I only had time, I think, like 2 or 3 days a week to do runs. But I started doing runs, and started slowly practicing, learning everything. And then COVID happens, and then I have all this time on my hands because college is remote now. So I'm literally just the computer I'm at now. That's what I used for college. I was at my computer for college. I was at home all the time. I had to work, but like, again, at work, I was in the back room, and other than that, I didn't really have a life. So thankfully, the thing with COVID was I got to stream and speedrun so much. I was practicing like every day. I was speedrunning like 5 days a week, streaming 5 days a week, and just grinding really hard. So I slowly progressed, and then right before ESA, so I had gotten ESA, Ratchet and Clank, along with Harry Potter, into ESA. I was already pretty warmed up and stuff. I got Ratchet and Clank into ESA, and then right before ESA, at the time, I got second place, which was like a 114 at the time. I was really happy. I was like, oh my god, like I got second place in this game. I've only been running for a few months. This is awesome. Like, and I got into ESA. Like, wow. I think after ESA, I'll move on. No, because right after ESA, a bunch of strats were just found. Like, just Ratchet and Clank 2 is a speedrun that literally has gotten flipped upside down multiple times, and I was part of it for one of those eras. So a bunch of runners of the other Ratchet and Clank categories, not just the All Platinum Bolts, but like NG Plus and other strat hunters, including Fear SR, another good friend of mine. They just started looking into All Platinum Bolts more because it's just some things just looked like they could be done faster, and then so they were starting to find faster strats. And then we found a big breakthrough. We found a wrench proxy. So as I mentioned earlier, you can do a proxy by charging into a wall and using the decoy glove, and Ratchet will just go up the wall while you're using the decoy glove. We found out, or no, swing shot proxies. We found out, so Mantodia, my friend that I mentioned back before, he found it by accident. He was just messing around with the game, and he was on so there's a gadget in the game called the swing shot, and you use it to just swing across different like little nodes. He found out if you let go of the swing shot while you're at the peak of Ratchet's height, and you just hold the wrench button over an enemy, it'll just get launched up in the air, just like super high. So that was like the big thing that was discovered, like right when I was gonna stop running the game. And we found several uses for it in the run that saved like an insane amount of time, like several minutes. So it was just like, okay, I can't stop. Like, because the thing is, like, I'm not gonna stop when they find new strats, because like my second place time is gonna be irrelevant, very soon. So then they started finding that stuff like late 2020, and then I was grinding, and I actually eventually, I had second place at the time. Zem had the world record. I actually got the world record later 2020. I got the world record with the new strats, obviously. So the world record, I think, was like a 1:12:02, and I got a 1:12:58. So I barely beat it. And so I got that in late 2020, and I held the world record for 2 days. I held the world record that was the shortest world record I've ever had. And that's the only world record I've gotten in Ratchet and Clank 2, and I held it for 2 days. So I got So Zem, he saw that I was getting closer to his time, and he also like he like whatever ratchet game he was grinding at the time, he had finished up, and he's just like, yeah, Dill's about to beat my time. I gotta go back and defend it. So literally, like, he saw me get closer, and I think before I got world record, I got a 112, and Zem was in my stream, and he's just like, I'm coming back tomorrow. He's like, I'm not. He was like, he's a very competitive person, and he was just like, I'm sorry, but I'm not letting you have world record. And it was just like, oh, okay. So he got back onto the grind, and I remember I got world record, and I went to his chat the next day. And he's just like, Dill, I'm gonna get it back in the next few days. I'm telling you, I'm not even kidding. He's like, I'm gonna grind. He's like, I'm gonna grind longer than you, and I'm gonna get it back. And obviously, it's just a friendly rivalry, but he was serious. Like, he was gonna get it back, and sure enough, he got it back. Like, he got it back in 2 days. So he got it back in like such short time. He got like a 111.33 or something. Like, he got it back, and I was like, oh my god. Like, and I was just like, I gotta get it back too. And on top of that, we actually both got Ratchet and Clank into AGDQ 2021. So, and it was unfortunately still remote at the time because COVID was still happening. But yeah, Zem and I actually submit Ratchet and Clank. We submit it both solo and as a race, and they actually took it as a race. So Zem and I got Ratchet and Clank all platinum bolts into AGDQ 2021, which was amazing. Like, not only had I gotten into ESA in 2020, I was going to be in AGDQ, in a few months in the new year. I was just so ecstatic.
And that's your first GDQ, like, being in the event, right?
Yeah, that was my first GDQ I'd ever been in the event, like, as a runner. So it was, and again, it sucks that I wasn't able to do it in person, but I was still able to do it, within the event, within the marathon, do it online. I got a runner shirt and everything, and it was still an amazing experience to be a part of. But yeah, so we both got into GDQ while we were grinding Ratchet and Clank, and then he ended up just grinding all platinum bolts into oblivion, like, because he's just, at the time, he was just a much better runner than me. Like, not only had he been running Ratchet and Clank games since 2013, and then again he had been running Ratchet and Clank 2, I think, since like 2015 or 2016. So he had years of experience off of me, who had only been running it for less than a year. So I unfortunately hit a mental wall. I just, for like the longest time before GDQ, I just was not able to PB. I think I was stuck at that like 111.57 or 58 for like until right before GDQ. I was stuck at that until GDQ. So I ended up taking a little break before GDQ, but he was grinding. He grinded the Ratchet and Clank 2 world record down from a 111, like, when he got world record back, a 111 3x, all the way down to, at the time, was a 108. So because again, all those new strats that we found, they just added up. So he ended up getting a 108 before GDQ, and it was just insane. Like, I even said, I was like, I'm not gonna beat that. Like, I'm not gonna beat that for a long time. So GDQ comes around, and my GDQ experience, honestly, like, I was actually pretty disappointed in my run. Like, we both got under our estimate. Our estimate was 1 hour 20 minutes, but Zem got a 110, which was 2 minutes off world record. I got like a 117 or 118 because I made some dumb mistakes. And the thing is, with a marathon setting, especially in a race setting, if you make a mistake, sometimes it's just too much to you're not able to catch up. I think I had some dumb mistakes. I was just really nervous, and I did not play as well as I wanted to. But it was still cool to be on GDQ. I still look back. I'm very grateful to be part of that whole experience and be part of that that event and run alongside one of my close friends. And then after GDQ, Zem moved on from Ratchet and Clank. He's like, or from Ratchet 2. He's like, I'm gonna run. He ran another Ratchet and Clank game at that point, so he put the towel up for Ratchet 2. But I kept grinding because I was just like, I want to get at least a sub 110 because I wanted to get at least close to world record. So I started grinding a little bit here and there again. And it's funny because, like, when my mental wall that I had hit, it just went away. I think within a week after GQ, I got a 110 on a really bad run. I was like, okay, cool. Like, it was just all in my head. I hit one of those mental walls, and I was able to actually get a 110. It was awesome. And then I grinded a little bit more. And then, COVID, around like April or May, I think that's when they started to like give out like COVID vaccines and stuff. My brother at the time was living in New York, and I really wanted to visit him. So I got all my shots and stuff. And I, because the world was starting to open up again. So I was like, oh my God, I can travel and go places. And so I made a trip to New York, but I made it a goal. I was like, I want to get sub 110 at least before I go to New York in June. And I got it like a few days before I left for New York. I did offline attempts because I think I was just done for the day streaming, and I was like a 109 something, but I'd finally gotten a 109. And yeah, it was still second place at the time too as well. So I was just happy to get that, and I was just like, all right, I'm good for now. I grinded this game on and off for a good amount of time, and yeah, at the time it was second place. And then fast forward to today, Zem and I both haven't done runs since. So Zem still has a 108. I still have a 109. The world record now is a 1 flat. They found like a bunch of other stuff last year. Like they found a ton of new strats. So that's a game I definitely want to eventually go back to, because even on like a rusty run with all the strats they've found, I actually have learned some of the new strats like here and there. I just messing around with the game. For when I do eventually go back to Ratchet and Clank, they just save so much time. But yeah, I will eventually go back to Ratchet and Clank. But yeah, my last PB is from 2021. I think it's Zem and I are both still top 10, which is cool. But yeah, obviously both of us, our PBs are outdated, and Zem's he's actually recently talked about going back to all platinum bolts. We call it APB. I was like, yo, it'd be cool if we both go back at the same time, reignite the rivalry. So maybe we'll see that in the future. Maybe both of us will go back to Ratchet and Clank 2, and we'll have the DylWingo and Zem rivalry for world record, and maybe that'll happen again. But yeah, for now, that game, they found a ton of new strats. Mantodia, who I mentioned earlier, he started running all platinum bolts after I stopped, and then he actually got world record. He had world record for the longest time. He's second place now. But yeah, he helped find some of those new strats. So yeah, shout outs to Manto. And yeah, I think world record now, yeah, it's like 1 flat something by this guy from Australia named Emeralv. But yeah, Manto actually, he's again, another shout out to him. He started grinding APB like right after I stopped. I think like late 2021, and going into 2024, he's still grinding it. He's like me, where he takes breaks, but he's literally been grinding that game since, and I think he's getting close to getting world record back again. So hopefully he'll manage to take it back, and then eventually, hopefully, I'll go back to Ratchet and Clank. But yeah, that's my story with the Ratchet and Clank speedrunning.
Yeah, I'm noticing a trend, at least for now, where all of these runs are like around the same time.
Yeah.
Like just around an hour.
Yeah. It's funny because it's like at the time of when I started running those games, the times were around like a little over an hour, 10 minutes. Obviously, all those runs have been a little bit more optimized nowadays, but yeah, even nowadays the runs are between like an hour and 12 minutes. Like I don't know why, I was attached to runs
Found that
with that
sweet
length.
spot.
Yeah, it's a sweet spot of not being too short, but then also not being too long either. And then also it's just funny because all 3 of those games were games I grew up with, and they had like nostalgic value to me, and also just childhood emotions and attachment. So yeah, all people actually did say that back in 2021 and 2020, like, you only run games that are in this length. I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll break that streak soon. And lo and behold, the next speedrun, whenever we talk about it, is way less than those runs. But yeah, it's in that sweet spot for sure.
Yeah. Well, what was next then? What broke it?
So and this is the first speedrun that I started running where I have no childhood nostalgia for. I didn't even play the game until I was in my 20s. I'm still in my 20s, but like a few years ago. So there's a PlayStation 1 platformer. It's called Klonoa Door to Phantomile. It's made by Namco. Namco, the creators of Pac-Man and all that. I think they make Tekken 2 as well, like the Tekken series. But yeah, Namco. So Namco, yeah, they made this game for the PlayStation 1 called Klonoa Door to Phantomile. It is a 2.5D platformer. So it is you have 2D sprites, but in like a 2.5D environment. So you have side scrolling, but you also have areas in like the 2.5D plane. You can go outwards, inwards, etc. So originally, I actually was first exposed to speedrun in 2019. 2018/2019. So I had a friend. I have a friend at the time, Trav. He doesn't speedrun too much anymore, but he back in the day he speedran a lot of Crash Bandicoot, and he started speedrunning in 2018 Klonoa. And I asked him, I was like, "What is this game?" And he told me about it. he started speedrunning it, and then he actually got it into AGDQ 2019, and that's also where I first met him in person. Traub and I also actually went to Japan a few months ago. He was one of the people that came with me, which was awesome. So I got to meet up with him again for the first time in years in Japan, which was amazing. But yeah, Traub's one of my close friends, and yeah, so he started running Klonoa, and like I would be in VC calls with him on Discord, and he'd screen share. And Klonoa, like a few months before GDQ, it was a very straightforward run. You know, it's a platformer game. There's like little optimizations you could do in the game, in the levels. Nothing too fancy. Some RNG here and there. And it looked like a cool run. And then right before GDQ, so Traub, I think he was like top 5 in the game. In the tasks of Klonoa, they're actually able to so in the game in Klonoa can, it's a very basic game. So Klonoa can jump. If you hold down the jump over large gaps, Klonoa can glide for like 2 seconds, and then he can grab enemies and throw enemies. That's it. Like it's a very basic game. In the tasks, they found out if Klonoa holds an enemy above his head, and you do 1 frame inputs while you're facing up or down, so you have to do 1 frame inputs left or right while you're holding up or down, you can actually clip into some doors and some walls in levels. And at the time, it was TAS only, so they found the strats. It was TAS only until I don't even know who, because I wasn't involved in the community at the time, but people started messing with the game, and people actually started to find RTA setups for these TAS clips. So Traub told me about it, and I started looking at the run more, and then he started showing me like all this, because it was like minutes saved, like minutes, like you'd save minutes, like in specific levels, because they found all these we call them door clips or wall clips, and yeah, he learned all of those, like, because they came out with a ton of them before, like right before GDQ, it was weeks before GDQ. He had to upgrade all of his strats and stuff. Was able to get like a 4th place time right before GDQ. And then he had a really good GDQ run. It was like less than a minute off his PB. I watched the GDQ run in full. I was just like, oh my god, this looks like such a cool speed run. I want to run this. So in 2019, so Klonoa, the optimal version of Klonoa is really funny. So it's a PS1 game, but in Japan, they re-released it on a PS2 disc as part of like this Namco Classics collection. It's called Namco Collection. So it's a disc that has several different Namco PS1 games. I actually have it right here. So it's a it's a Namco 50th anniversary collection. It has Klonoa. It has Mr. Driller, Tekken, Ridge Racer, and Ace Combat. And yeah, so they released this PS2 game only in Japan. But we found out that this disc-based speedrunning, shout out to disc-based speedrunning, this was the fastest way of loading Klonoa for speedruns, because it had faster loads than PS1 disc. And then there's even a device called PlayStation TV. It's like basically a PlayStation Vita, but you can plug it into your TV, and you can actually download not all PS1 games, but some PS1 games on there. And that was actually an optimal way of speedrunning Klonoa, but it loads it faster than that. So this disc was the optimal way of speedrunning Klonoa. So I needed a Japanese PS2, and then I needed this Japanese copy of Namco Collection to run Klonoa. So I actually ordered this back in 2019. I was like, I'm gonna learn the run, like I'm gonna learn it, and blah 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 blah. And it was one of those things where like I kept saying I'll get to it eventually, and I just never did. I never bought it. I remember Traub would even say in VCs, he's like, "You're never gonna learn Klonoa." I told him, I was like, "Yeah, at this point, probably not." So then after I came back from my New York trip, I was still in the mood to grind speedrunning. I was just like, all right, I'll learn something new. I was like, maybe I'll do Klonoa finally. So I replayed Klonoa. I replayed the game. I replayed it in full. And then because I made the save file to have all the levels and stuff unlocked. And then I started messing around with the game. I started like slowly learning the clips and stuff. I was like, you know what? Maybe I will learn the speedrun. So I learned the speedrun. I did runs for about like a week or two. I got like a top 12 time. And then I think I just got busy with school because it was my last semester of college. So I was just really busy. And then I found time again like a month or so later. I grinded for like maybe a few weeks, and then I got at the time 4th place, which was so the world record at the time was 37:58. So my original goal was to get under like a sub 40, so just to get like a 39 or better. I got a sub 40. It felt like crap, so I was like, oh, I keep going. And then I got lower. 39, and then I ended up getting 39.15, I think. Which that run it is my current PB. But yeah, I barely grinded Klonoa. At most a few weeks. I barely grinded Klonoa, but it's a really cool speed run. It's a very short run. Again, like the world record nowadays, it's like 37 something, but very short run. It's very basic, but again, there's a lot of cool task-like tricks, like with the door clips and stuff. Even the non-clips and tricks, there's just a lot of cool platforming optimizations in the levels. Some of the bosses have RNG variants, so that can be either a good thing or a bad thing. A good thing because it adds thrill to the run. A bad thing because if you get bad RNG and you lose time, you're pissed off, and it's just you just lose time. And it's not fun. But yeah, no, it was a cool speedrun. I didn't grind it that long. It's another run I eventually want to go back to. Because I feel like I barely even played it, but at the time I think my time now it's like 7th place. It's still top 10, but I barely grinded it. But yeah, I got 4th place at the time. It was cool. My run like at the time it was on world record pace until I got to the last few levels of the game. I had just like really bad chokes, like really bad chokes. So the last level in the game, there's like this big this giant skip you do that saves several minutes. I choked it I think twice and I lost like 30 seconds. And then there's a boss right afterward before the final boss called Gadius. And Gadius is like probably the hardest boss in the game because you have to the way you have to beat Gadius is there's multiple cycles of the boss and you want to actually skip his final cycle. And to do so, the second to last phase, you need to have like really tight timing on attacking him. And it can be RNG dependent because of the way the enemies come towards you. And I had just a terrible Gaddies. I think I lost like 30 seconds on that as well. So like that's literally those two alone. It's like a minute of time save. And then I had some time loss on the last level. So literally if I had like a perfect or a near perfect final set of levels, I would have gotten world record at the time, which would have been like a 37. It would have been like a 37 5x. But yeah, I ended up getting like a 39.15, which again still sub 40. It's still decent time. Still decent time for nowadays. But I eventually want to go back. They found a few new strats here and there for Klonoa. Not much has changed for that run because again, it's very basic run. They found most of what can be found, but they have found some new strats. I think the world record now it's like a mid or low 37. The new world record holder Ammo Sir, he's an insane speedrunner. He only is running Klonoa, but he just is just very, very good. But yeah, eventually I want to go back to Klonoa. It's a really cool speedrun. I just didn't run it for that long, and I didn't invest that much time into it. But again, really cool run, very short, and definitely one of the. I mean, all my speedruns that I've done have been cool, but definitely one of the more interesting ones just because of how short it is and how short-lived it's been for my speedrun timeline so far. So
yeah, it's funny you keep calling it short when to me that's pretty long. Yeah, I'm so used to my like 100% in games being half an hour.
Yeah, because I mean, like even like Mario, like the all levels category warp list, it's like 18 minutes, which is like it's like half of Klonoa. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like when you compare, like when you compare one person's speedruns to another person's speedruns. Somebody's long speedrun can be like 30 minutes. I mean, for you, that's like, it's short. Like, what are you talking about? So, yeah. So, but yeah, Klonoa is a cool speedrun. It's a very cool speedrun. It's one of my favorite games of all time. Definitely still nowadays. Short game, cool little tricks, cool little skips. Glad I got to run it. Again, it's also a game I'll go back to at some point. Crash and Harry Potter are kind of just, I'll probably never touch those ever again, but Ratchet and Klonoa, eventually, definitely, I'll go back to them at some point. So,
yeah. Well, I guess what's next? Sounds like you covered that one.
Yeah. So this is the big one. So the big ones. Yeah. This is what I've been doing on and off the last few years. Well, since like 2022. So last 2 years or so. But yeah. So we'll go back all the way to the start of the pandemic. So I'm sure you've heard of the Final Fantasy series. It's like one of the most popular JRPG series of all time. Dates back to the NES. The first one's on the NES, which is amazing. I mean, the first 6 are on Nintendo consoles, which is really cool. So yeah, Final Fantasy VII actually came out. Well, Crash actually came out in 1997, but so did Final Fantasy VII. But I never even played or even cared for any Final Fantasy games like in my whole life. I had no desire to play them. I don't know what even drove me to, but at the start of the pandemic, Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is like part one of like the full remake trilogy. So Final Fantasy VII, they remade it for the PS4, at least the first part of Final Fantasy VII for the PS4. And I remember I heard people talking about it. And I don't even know, I still don't even know why I even got interested in it, but I was just like, I've always saw that game and I've always seen it, but like, is it a good game? And people are like, oh, the original is amazing. So I ended up buying the original Final Fantasy VII for PS1 right before right before the summer of 2020. Because again, pandemic. We were all stuck at home.
Mhm.
So I was like, I'll buy an RPG. I don't really play many RPGs. I'll buy an RPG. I'll play it. So I bought Final Fantasy VII. I bought the remake and the original, but I wanted to play the original first because the remake, I'll get to that in a minute, but the remake, it's not even complete. There's only 2 parts right now of 2 or 3 parts that are out. The third part's not coming out for a few years. But anyway,
Yeah, that's
I
funny.
bought the original.
Sorry.
Oh, no,
The
go ahead.
remake is like 3 parts, like how the original's 3 discs.
Yeah,
That's kind of funny.
Yeah, and I'm actually wearing my Rebirth shirt because the newest game just came out almost a month ago.
Right?
Yeah. So I just beat it over the weekend. Amazing game. But anyway, so I bought the original Final Fantasy VII. I think in June of 2020. I was like, all right, I'm gonna start this game. Like I'm gonna start it. And yeah, I never really played RPG games at all, but I just fell in love with the game. I loved the game. It was just an amazing experience. I'm glad I got to experience it the first time. I'm not gonna say it because who knows if anybody knows or doesn't know it. The big plot twist in Final Fantasy VII. Most people know what it is, and I unfortunately knew what it was because I got it spoiled to me from a Screw Attack video years ago, from a top 10 PlayStation 1 games. It was so dumb.
I'm guessing it's the big one.
It's the
everyone knows that.
Yeah, so I already knew that was happening. Like that's the only thing I knew about the game was just that. And then obviously the main villain was Sephiroth. But so I played the game and it took me like a month, because I played it on and off. I'd play like 8 hours a day, wouldn't play it for a few days, play 8 hours a day, blah 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 blah. I played it on and off, and I ended up really enjoying it. It was an amazing game. It was my favorite game at the time. I was just like, this is an amazing game. And then so I was just like, hey, what do the speedruns look like in this game? So I started actually, because again, during COVID, at my job at the grocery store, I was in the back room packaging food, and just watching Twitch for 6-7 hours a shift. So I had all this time to watch Twitch or watch movies or whatever while I was packaging. So I was like, I'm going to start looking into Final Fantasy speedruns. And I actually met one of my good friends, Egder. I met him in the Harry Potter community, and back in 2019, when both him and I were running Harry Potter, he ran Final Fantasy games on PlayStation 1, and he ran 7, 8, and 9. And I remember he was just like, yo, you should come by my stream when I'm running Final Fantasy. I was just like, all right. And I came by one of his streams. I was just like, I told him, I was like, why would you run an RPG? This is so long. Like, it's like 7, 8 hours. He's like, it's fun. I'm like, this looks boring. He's like, no, you have to try it, and trust me, it's fun. So I was like, all right, whatever. I was like, I'm just not into RPGs, whatever. So fast forward to after I finished Final Fantasy, I started actually looking into the speedrun because I was just curious. I was just like, how does the speedrun for this game? So then I found like the speedrun.com, and I found one of my good friends, Zeal. He was the world record holder. He's one of the best Final Fantasy VII speedrunners even today. He had the world record in Final Fantasy at the time. So the main competitive category for Final Fantasy VII is called any percent no slots. And what that means is, so there's a character in the game. His name is Kate Sith. He's the cat right here, Kate Sith. So Kate Sith in the original Final Fantasy VII, he has a limit break move called slots, where if you do slots and you perform it to where if you perform all 3 slots that form into the shape of his face, it's just insta kill. It insta kills any boss, including the final boss. So any
Sounds
percent
broken.
slot, it's very broken. So in the regular any percent category, you get Kate Sith like a little over 2 hours into the game. So as you get him, you grind him to get to in order for him to get because I think it's a level 2 limit break to get slots, and then you literally just use slots for the rest of the game. And it sounds easy, but it's actually not, because there's a lot of like you have to actually line up the slots perfectly, and some bosses you only get one chance because it's fast. It's an actual slot machine. On top of some bosses have a lot of lag, so some bosses you have to put the inputs in like specific timing. So that's any percent, but I didn't have interest in that because it's not the main category. I had interest in 80% no slots because that's the main because I like to run the competitive categories, the ones that more people are running. So 80% no slots, it bans slots. You're not allowed to do slots. You're not allowed to use Kate Sith for his slot. You can use him, but you can't use the slots ability. So I started looking into speedruns, and I saw a guy named Zeal had the world record. I didn't know who he was. I started to tune into his stream, and he was actually starting to grind FF7. At the time, the world record was 7 hours and 11 minutes. I'm just like, wow, that's long, but that's really cool that you can beat like a 40-hour game in under 8 hours. That was just amazing. So I started watching Zeal, and I started watching a few other people run FF7, and I was just really blown away. It was just really cool because like seeing all the different, because in a turn-based RPG, you put your turns in to get, and then you do your actions. The boss gets turns, vice versa. But with Final Fantasy VII, it was just crazy because seeing all the bosses, just like, because for one thing, in the speedrun, you're like severely underleveled for most of the run. Like you're beating bosses at such a low level, but because of all the mechanics you can do in the game, you can just destroy most of the bosses. So the main mechanic in Final Fantasy VII, the main damage dealer per se, is actually Tifa for no slots, and she's my favorite character in Final Fantasy VII. Anybody will tell you how much I'm obsessed about her, but yeah, so she's actually in no slots. She's the main damage dealer, so she actually has you get actually, funnily enough, a little bit after Kate said, but she has a weapon called the Power Soul, and the Power Soul has an ability where if Tifa is in low critical health, so if you have 25% or less health and you're in the critical range, you'll actually do 4 times your damage. But if you add, there's an enemy skill called Death Sentence. If you add Death Sentence to the critical health damage, it quad stacks it. So it's like 16 times damage. It's like yeah, so it just stacks onto the Power Soul damage. So in the first part of the game, in the first part of the speedrun, it's funny. The first several fights of the game, you're literally just throwing grenades because the grenades are actually really broken in that game. So you can get the grenades early on in the game. So the early game bosses are very basic. You throw grenades. You use just basic magic attacks, and it's very like the first few bosses are very basic. And then after you get the Power Soul, the run has changed definitely a little bit since I started having interest in the game, especially when I started running it. But we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, so you would originally get the Power Soul, and then you'd get Death Sentence in Cosmo Canyon, which is before you get the Power Soul. And then from literally the Temple of the Ancients, which is near the end of Disc 1 to the end of the game, you just use Tifa, and like you just destroy the bosses. Obviously, it's not just attacking with her. There's actual strategies, but you just destroy the bosses with Tifa. Like, and the one downside to using Tifa is there is a bit of RNG. So in order to get the optimal amount of damage, you need to get crit damage. And so we use this material called Death Blow onto her. So Death Blow, what it does, it's an attack, but it's a critical attack, and it's critical damage. Unfortunately, with Death Blow, unless the enemy is stunned, it has about a 33% chance of hitting. So there's a lot of RNG in some bosses in some cases. So there's some bosses we can paralyze, and then we can just Death Blow and just defeat them in like a few turns, and that's it. But then there's other bosses where there's actually RNG because you have a 33% chance of hitting, 66% chance of not hitting, and then that's where the RNG comes in. That's what makes it fun, like the RNG and stuff too. But and then later in the end of the speedrun, you actually get the Mistile, which is it's an armlet, and it actually makes it so the Death Blow hits every time. So the last few bosses, they're like, in my opinion, they're some of the easiest bosses because the Death Blows are guaranteed to hit, so you just plow through them. But anyway, yeah, so I started watching Zeal. I started watching a bunch of other runners. I was really just impressed with how they were just destroying these bosses. It was just so insane. So I was like, yeah, I I don't know if I can run this because it's just such a it's such a long game. And at the time, there was only two big skips they did. The first skip, which is actually one of the oldest skips in FF7. So at the end of Disc 2, after defeating a boss called Diamond Weapon, you're supposed to return to the city of Midgar and fight like several bosses, and then get to Hojo and then fight Hojo. A few years ago, this is like the oldest skip in FF7. It's one of the easiest skips you can do in all of speedrunning. So I'll just get the controller right here. So during a specific cutscene, while you're mashing text, you just hold right and X, and you warp to the end of Disc 2. So you skip a whole dungeon. You skip the whole Midgar visit. So basically, in the game, in some cutscenes, there's actually Cloud, the main character. Cloud is off screen, and you can actually move him in some instances. And in this instance, during that cutscene, you can move him to go into the loading trigger of the final area of Disc 2, and you just warp to. You don't really warp, but you kind of do. So you basically warp to the final boss of Disc 2, at the end of Disc 2. So that saves like 20 minutes. So that was one skip. The other skip that was found in 2018 was called Guard Skip, where you can actually, it's another like 20-minute time save. Basically, in the early part of the game, in the first like 20 or so minutes, the next area of Midgar is blocked by these two guards. But in 2018, there was a PC modder named Suna, and Suna found out that you can actually use subpixels per se and clip in the guards and then out around, and then just go into the next loading zone, and that saves like it skips another whole dungeon. So that was found in 2018. So those are the only two big skips that were a thing in 2020. So I was just like, okay, it has skips, but it's a long run. So right when I started watching FF7, another skip was found called Cosmo Canyon Skip, which is another dungeon in the game. It's a pretty big. It's not only a dungeon; it's a whole town. But at the time, it was one of the hardest skips in the game. So basically, the old setup for Cosmo Canyon Skip, you needed to leave the desert prison on a specific in-game time. You have to catch a chocobo on a specific in-game time. And I don't know, I don't fully know how the old skip worked, because again, I wasn't fully around, but leave the chocobo encounter at a specific in-game time, and then you have to do pixel perfect movement on the world map until you get to Cosmo Canyon. And then once you get past Cosmo Canyon and you get to the position you need to, you're good. But again, it's like it was a huge, like, I would watch Zeal and he'd fail it, like, because again, you need pixel perfect movement on a giant world map from getting the chocobo to Cosmo Canyon, which is like, it's a long distance.
So is this like a manipulation of some sort?
Yeah, at the time it was a manipulation of the in-game time, and you're able to actually in the game, you have a buggy after you leave the desert prison, and the buggy, if you try going past Cosmo Canyon, the buggy will break down, because you need the buggy to get to the next area in the game. So the game essentially forces you to go to Cosmo Canyon because it's part of the story. Mm-hmm. And then once you do the Cosmo Canyon and the dungeon, which is the Cave of Gi, the buggy will be fixed, and then you can move on to the next part of the game. So with this manipulation, you could overwrite that buggy breakdown trigger, and then just go past Cosmo Canyon, and then just skip it entirely. At the time,
that's complicated.
At the time it was super complicated. So then again, and only Zeal and like 2 other runners were doing it at the time. Like only 3 runners. Some runners even stopped running the game because of how hard it was. Yeah, so at the time there were runners that just weren't doing it, and then there were runners that were doing it, which was like 3 of them, including Zeal. And then there were runners that just didn't want to run the game with the skip because it was so hard and so complicated. Because again, you needed, based on your average, because Midgar is the first part, it's the first hour and a half of the run, and the IGT it's based on your average Midgar time, which can vary. So people, you would need to have your own IGT. One person couldn't have the same IGT as another person. So you needed your own IGTs based on your average early game, it was just crazy. So, but I still would watch the speedruns, and Zeal ended up lowering the world record with Cosmo Canyon Skip from a 7:09, because the last record he got was without it, to a 6:59 or 6:58. So he got sub 7, under 7 hours. Under 7 hours for FF7, that was a big deal. He got it with the Cosmo Canyon Skip, and it was I saw it. It was amazing. I got to be there. It was awesome. Really cool. But I was just like, still, it's a long run for me. I'm not gonna run this. So then in early 2021, this new person came into the community. His name is Kuma. He had been watching FF7 speedruns previously, but he also was very interested in the science behind it. He found a incredibly easier setup for Cosmo Canyon skip, which like incredibly easier. First of all, doesn't need to rely on the in-game timer. You don't need to catch a glitch chocobo, and it was just overall just way easier. So what you would do is you would line it up on the beach below, and you would have to just line it up at a specific pixel. So it was still pixel perfect in one spot, but then afterwards you have to just drive the buggy to Cosmo Canyon in cardinal directions, so only up, down, left, right. You cannot go in any diagonal directions because the manipulation will fail. So with this pixel manipulation on the world map, you're able to trick the game when you get to Cosmo Canyon, and you're able to basically drive over the trigger. So once you get to Cosmo Canyon, you do similar to what you did at the beach. Is you do a pixel perfect setup. You get out of the buggy, get back in, move left pixel once, get out, get back in, and then you're able to just drive over the trigger. And it was significantly easier. So when Kuma found that, people came back to running the game.
The floodgates were opened.
Yeah, and on top of that, it was faster than the old skip. So it was faster than the old setup.
Nice.
So he found an easier setup and a faster setup. So people came back. Zeal ended up lowering the world record until like a 6:55. I was like, this is really cool, but like it's still long. Well, Kuma found another skip like months later. So after Midgar, and this skip was like the holy grail of skips that people wanted in the run. So after Midgar, you have about like a 20-minute section of the run called Calm. So after Midgar, you go northeast to this town called Calm, and basically Cloud talks about like his past with Sephiroth, and you basically go through a whole flashback sequence with him and how like he was aiding Sephiroth during the Nibelheim incident and stuff. And it's literally barely any like gameplay. It's a lot of dialogue and a lot of text mashing. And for the longest time, people were like, "There's gotta be a way to skip this." Kuma found it. So Kuma found calm skip. So basically, what you do is, so in the regular game, after Calm, there's an area called the Mithril Mines that you need to go through to pass to get to Junon, which is the next part of the game. And if you try to go through the Mithril Mines before Calm, Barrett will stop you and go, "Hey, Cloud, we should go to Calm so you can tell us about Sephiroth. Like we shouldn't be here right now." It'll basically flag you, and it won't let you pass through. And for the longest time, I think people were trying to actually skip over that flag, but you just couldn't. And so in the game, in the speed run before Calm skip, in the game you need to catch a chocobo to go through the swamp to avoid the Midgar Zolom, which is like this giant snake boss. In order for you to not fight him, because he's like higher level and he'll just insta kill you. So in the speed run before Calm skip, there was a way to manipulate the Zolom where you can literally just walk through the swamp and get to the Mithril Mines without a chocobo. And you can still do that, but now you need a chocobo. So Kuma found out that, and again, I can't really explain the big science behind it because it's very complex. There's YouTube videos about it. If you just look up Ace Zephyr Calm skip, shout outs to Ace Zephyr. He's one of the huge FF7 science people in the community. There's like videos that explain the science behind it, but basically I'll try to keep it short and sweet. You can basically glitch a chocobo, and with the glitch chocobo and with glitching Cloud's position on the world map, you can run through the mountain and clip through the mountain and just pass through the Mithril Mines, pass Calm, and go to the Junon area. And this saves like 20 minutes. So this was like the holy grail skip that was found in FF7, and it still is. This was like what everybody wanted, because again, Calm was just such a boring area. 20 minutes of dialogue, of mashing, and like a little bit of movement, but no bosses or anything. Everybody wanted this, and yeah, he found all this stuff, and that's what finally said to me. I was just like, I'll run the game. Like I'll learn the game. It's because again, 40 minutes have been shaved off since I had interest. I was like, that's like almost an hour. I'll learn the game. So I learned the game. I started learning the speedrun in like late 2021, like right after Klonoa. I didn't start doing my first runs until 2022, like March of 2022, so like 2 years from now, or 2 years ago. And yeah, so originally, so I started running Final Fantasy VII. Again, with Final Fantasy VII, it's still like, so the current world record is 6 hours and 31 minutes, I believe. So the current world record, you know, from when I started running the game, the world record I think was 6:39. So it's a lower by a few minutes, but even before Calm skip, it was 6:55. So it was still like it was still, you know, huge gap.
Mhm.
So yeah, nowadays the run is way more optimized. But yeah, I started running Final Fantasy VII March of 2022. And I actually, it was crazy. Like I had never speedrun a JRPG or anything other than a platformer, and I actually adapted into it fairly quickly. Um, my original goal was to get just under 7 hours because the world record at the time was 6:38. Um, it took like about like 2 months, but I was able to get under 7 hours, which was awesome. I got a 6:58, which was like I was really proud of myself because again I had never ran a JRPG, anything other than a platformer. I got under 7 hours. I was like, that's awesome. And then I took a little bit of a break, and then I ended up getting a job. So I graduated from college in December 2021. It took me a long time to get a job, but I finally got a full-time job, which is what I currently do. I work in marketing. I got a job. I work mostly remote, but sometimes I go to the office. But my first month of work, I had to go to the office like a few days a week. But I got the motivation to pick FF7 back up again. So I was like, I'll make time to grind it. I still made time. It was another one of those instances where like I hadn't ran the game since May. I got my sub 7 in May. Took a little break. Came back in August. Came back for like 2 weeks, and I got a 6:53, and then I got a 6:47, which was top 10 at the time. I was just like, okay, like didn't even take that long to get under 6 hours 50 minutes. I was like really happy, and I got top 10, which I was really happy with. And then I just took I took a big break from running because Final Fantasy VII is just such a long speed run. But I'm still obviously involved. I'm still in the community and watching streams and stuff. You know, there are new strats that are found. I'd still learn them and stuff. Took like a pretty big break, honestly, from like like late August to like what like March or April of last year. I didn't do any speed runs. I came back last year, and I was just like, yeah, I really want to improve my time. Like, I really, really want to get like a mid 6.4x or maybe even the sub 640 because that's like the current standard of a good run, sub 640. I came back, derusted. I grinded for about like 2 weeks, and I went from a 647 to a 641. And I was just like, how does this keep happening? Like, it's like, how does this keep happening? I come back for like 2 weeks and I keep improving my PB by so much. And it's funny, not like new strats are found, but it's not like anything major. But yeah, I improved my time, and then I was close to the sub 640. I actually went to ESA last year just to hang out with people, meet some European friends. That was a lot of fun. I grinded FF7 for a few months after ESA. And then the next discovery was found, but it was not in the form of anything in the game. It was in the form of discs. So, and this is the funniest but also dumbest thing ever. So, a few months back, when I was grinding FF7, a few runners of the game, Dash Retro, Luzbel, and a few others were like looking and comparing the world records of different games of different runners. And do you know Dash Retro? Because I think he's ran Mario.
Yeah, he has a brother, and they both did commentary for a lot of Mario 1 races. And yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I haven't heard the name in a few years, so I was like, oh shit.
He's a big FF7 speedrunner now, and he's like got like Twitch partner off of FF7.
Well, goddamn.
Yeah.
All right.
He gets like 100, like 200 plus. He's like a huge streamer now. It's crazy because I even watched him when he started. He actually started like almost around the same time as me, but not really. He started a few months before me with FF7, but yeah, no. He started running the game also when Column Skip came about, but yeah, no. Dash and Luzbel and a few others, they were looking at, because Zeal had the world record at the time, and they were looking at Zeal's world record, and they noticed that, and I thought all of them were just full of shit, to be honest. They were like, Zeal has faster loading screens than other people. I was like, no way. That's no way. And then so Dash, because Dash, he's also another big FF7 science guru. He starts like doing all this on stream. He starts comparing loads on stream, and he starts posting it. He's like, no, it's there. And I was just like, oh shoot. Like, I actually started to believe it. I was like, okay, there are loading discrepancies, but what are the loading discrepancies? So, as I mentioned before, PlayStation 1 speedruns are done on a PlayStation 2 Slim console because of the fastest speed. I didn't mention before, but specific models of the PlayStation 2 also matter as well. So there's several revisions of the Slim PS2. So there's the 70K, which is the first PS2 Slim model, 75K, 77K, 79K, and then the 90K. For most speedruns, for years, it's been noted that the 90K is the best console because it's the last PS2 revision. It actually has a slightly better performing CPU than the other PS2s, and overall, it's just the more reliable one because it's the newest of the PS2s. And even for FF7, I have a 90K PS2, so I run on 90K. So originally, we were gathering data, and people were asking Zeal, like, Zeal, what do you run on? And Zeal's like, oh, I run on a 77K. So Dash bought a 77K, and he bought, like, because with disc-based consoles, you need the laser to read the disc. So Dash bought, like, several lasers. He literally started configuring them on stream and doing all this tinkering and trying to see if he can mimic Zeal's loading times. No luck. He's like, what is it? What is going on? And we weren't able to figure it out. And then one day he just randomly says, what if it's the disc? He says, because I noticed on my copy of FF7, there's this code on the disc. What if this is the key? So I'll hold up my FF7 disc. I can actually see it. On the inner ring of the disc, you probably can't see it, but right here there's like a code. Okay. And so he was like, what if the code is the key? So I started asking people. I asked Zeal and a few other people. I asked random people, hey, on your disc 1, what are the letters and the numbers on your discs? So we started gathering data, and I was one of the people that was actually starting to compare loading times with Dash and everybody else. And so Zeal had a code of H41A12 on the inner disc. I didn't have that. I had some G7 whatever. I didn't have that. Dash didn't have that. Almost no one had that except for like 2 other runners. 2 other runners had the same exact disc code as Zeal, which is the RJ and then Chef Bomb. So I looked at both of their runs and I compared those fast loadings, and they all had the same loads. I was like, oh my god, they have the same loads. We might be getting somewhere. So then other people started looking at other runners, and so 2 other runners had H41A11 instead of 12, and guess what? We compared those to Zeal and everybody else, same loads. The same fast loads. You compared them to people like me or Dash that had non-fast loads, and we were losing time to them. So, and then eventually we came to finding a database online that has PlayStation 1 disc data, and it actually had Final Fantasy VII on there, and it had the H41A 1, 2, and 1 for disc 1 that we were looking at for those potential fast loads. And so we're still not 100% sure, but from what we've gathered and what we've talked about with other people, and there's even people that went out of their way to talk to like CD-ROM enthusiasts, like in the physical media community, not even in the speedrun community. We found out that, and we came to a theory that some factories that manufacture, because Sony had like a bunch of factories that manufactured PlayStation 1 discs for them, there's specific batches that have a write offset value on the disc that is a negative 600 something number, that we think that write offset makes the data read faster than every other print. So from what we've tested, and we came to the conclusions for every disc to disc 1, 2, and 3, we have thankfully found out. So with the black label copies of FF7, the non-greatest hits, you can't see those numbers. They're there, but you can't see them because the black label copies have like a solid white coating on the disc, so you can't see those numbers. With the greatest hits, it's just a silver plain disc, so you can see those numbers. We found out that specific prints of the greatest hits version of FF7 have faster loads than every other print. And so we finally got all the data like in the span of like a month or 2. It took like a lot of time to find this data. We finally were able to gather all of the data, and we were able to find like there's like several variations, but thankfully they're all greatest hits. On eBay listings, a lot of the time, sellers, if they post good pictures, you can actually see the code on the disc. So this disc, my set of discs that I have, I was able to see the codes like on the listing. I just zoomed in and I was able to see it. So thankfully, we know what codes are fast discs. They're greatest hits, so you can actually see the codes. And then worst case, if you can't see the codes on the disc, you usually can message an eBay seller. If they're not assholes, they'll tell you the codes. But it's really funny because a bunch of us at that time were all trying to find. We call them Sonic discs because Sonic the Hedgehog gotta go fast. We call them Sonic discs.
Okay.
All of us were trying to find these FF7 Sonic discs. And it's funny because it eventually got to the point where I had a seller that messaged me because I was like, "Hey, what's the code on these discs?" And they said, "You're not the first person to ask me this week. I've had 2 other people ask me about the disc code on the inner ring." I was just laughing as I posted in the Discord. I was like, "Oh my god, we're actually getting to them. Like, people are actually starting to realize." And then it didn't really spark that much debate in the community, but some people that don't speedrun FF7, they were like, "Are you going to separate this from from normal discs, or like is this going to be a separate board?" But like, no, because the good thing about this is the greatest hits version of FF7 is not only the cheapest, but it's the most accessible. And like I mentioned, you can easily see the disc codes in the inner ring of the disc. And then on top of that, you know, the game's pretty cheap. And then everybody at that point, I'm not even kidding, I bought 6 or 7 Sonic discs. I shipped them to people that weren't in the States so I could test them, because the thing is, if you're running a speedrun that's NTSC optimal and you live in Paris and you import it and then you get the game and it doesn't work, you just wasted money. So what I did was I went out of my way. I bought like 7 copies of FF7, and I just tested them to make sure they were fast loads, and also they worked, and also they were in good condition. And I shipped them to a bunch of friends in the community, which was just hilarious because, like, if you look at my eBay history in that period, it's just Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 7. Like, I bought like so many copies of Final Fantasy 7. It's not even funny. I have 2 copies for myself. I have a backup copy, and this is my main copy I use for runs. But yeah, so it was just such a funny time that was the big discovery that happened last year, the Sonic discs. And it's funny because so unfortunately, my current PB is the 641 that I mentioned I got last summer, because I grinded FF7 for a few months after we found the Sonic disc discovery. But then, it's a long run, hard run. I grinded until about like November, and then I went to Japan in November for 2 weeks. I came back from Japan. I didn't want to speedrun. I wanted to just do other things, and then I'm actually gonna go back to FF7 fairly soon because I finished the Rebirth, the remake part 2. And yeah, hopefully get a PB with the Sonic disc, because the Sonic discs, we found out they save a minute in the whole run, and in a 6.5 hour run, that's a lot of time. I think it's even a little bit over a minute. I think it's like a minute and a half, I think, at max. So my run is a 6:41:14. If I had Sonic discs, I would have been a sub 640, which is crazy to think about, but it's not, though, because my run's not done on Sonic discs. Because some people have said, like, well, you basically have a sub 640. It's like, I don't, though, because I don't have the run. It's like, in theory I do, yeah, but I don't have the sub 640 because I'm not on my PB isn't on Sonic discs. My PB are on, like, we call them crap discs. Which I still have that set, but because I don't want to get rid of them or anything. But yeah, so I haven't gotten a PB yet on the Sonic disc because I just haven't. I just took another break from speedrunning, but I do plan on. I have already started derusting FF7. I do plan on derusting and getting back into it very soon, and then hopefully getting. I think I'm 6th or 7th right now on the leaderboard, and I want to get back in the top 5 at least, because I was top 5 with my 641 before we found out the Sonic disc. I think I was like 5th or 4th place, and then we got the Sonic disc stuff, and then people started PBing, and then I got bopped and stuff. But yeah, no, it's just a crazy time, because then like Zeal also, like, Zeal, when he had the world record, he had no idea he even had these discs. He's like, I had no idea I had these. Holy crap! Like, what the hell? Like, and then Morningcraft, who he actually started a little bit. He started the same time as Dash Retro. He was grinding for a world record, and he got a 638, which was close to world record, without world record. No. Zeal got a 633. That's right. Zeal got a 633. Like, I think last year. Morningcraft ended up getting a 634 or something without Sonic discs. So we got close to world record without them. Then we found out about the Sonic discs, and he got world record in like a few weeks. He finally got it, and like he got like a 632.
He would have had it, or at least got very close to it with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and like I said, Zeal, he had Zeal had 638, and then he had 635, and then he had 633 beginning of last year, before Sonic discs. He was beginning last year of 2022. with the Sonic discs, but he didn't know he had them. Morningcraft had a 634 without Sonic discs, but then he got a 632 with them, so he beat world record by a good amount. And then the current world record is by Lesbel. He has a 631. It's not on speedrun.com though, unfortunately, but that is the current world record holder and the current world record. And then there's an entirely new route that he does that saves a minute and a half that no one else currently does. But Morningcraft and Zeal are coming back to FF7 as well very soon. So I don't know how soon Morningcraft is. He's talked about it, but Zeal definitely has talked about coming back to FF7 very soon. I can definitely see him getting world record back, especially with the new route that saves a minute and a half. Basically, there's a materia we get in as I mentioned earlier with the column skip. You clip through that mountain, and you skip the column in the Mithril Mines. But actually, on the old route, we actually go into the Mithril Mines to grab this materia called the long range materia because we need it to give it to Tifa in order for her to take less damage, because we need her in the back row, because if you're in the back row for fights, you take less damage. Same thing with Cloud and the Temple of the Ancients. We need the long range materia for all of that. But you can actually skip the long range materia. So skipping the long range materia is about like 45 seconds. And then the whole route, because of how the game is routed with the step route, it saves another 40 something seconds. So it's like a minute and a half of time save with that called the no long range route. It is a much harder route because it's way riskier, because Cloud, when you use Cloud with Deathblow and then when you use Tifa, they're in the front row, so they take more damage. So it is a slightly more riskier route, but it saves a minute and a half. I'm not going to do it when I go back to it because it's only worth it if you're going for world record. But I imagine Zeal, and if Morningcraft comes back, they're both going to do the no long range route. But yeah, no, FF7, it's just, there's been so many discoveries ever since I started watching, ever since I started playing the game. It's a very cool run. Like I said, there's several skips in the game, really cool boss strategies, and there's also in the game, so in Final Fantasy games, in every Final Fantasy game until 9, there's actually what's called the step count. So in the game, encounters are actually not random. In Final Fantasy 1 through 8, encounters are actually not random. Encounters are predetermined based on several variables in the game. So what we can do in the game is, if we have good, tight, specific movement on what are called hostile screens, which are screens that have encounters on them, we can actually make it so we have the same amount of encounters and the same exact encounters each run. So with FF7, there's actually several encounters we need to do to get enemy skills for the game. So they're basically enhancements to have for the boss fights. The step routes are actually, so Zeal and whoever else, they all make these step routes through like Excel spreadsheets and through Glab. It's just crazy. I don't know how to make a step route, but shout outs to all of them, because they, and Acepher and all the science people, they're all wizards at that stuff. But yeah, step route stuff is just crazy, because finding new step routes always takes time. And yeah, so we're basically able to manipulate the in-game encounters with having good movement. And also some encounters we actually do what's called walking steps, where we can actually walk a specific amount of steps and it'll skip the next encounter. So if we're on a screen, we get an encounter and then we have to walk 10 steps. We'll walk 10 steps and then we'll run again, and then it'll skip the next encounter. So I believe in Final Fantasy VII in no slots, I believe the optimal amount of encounters is 54, 53, and a few of them are actually skippable by doing pause buffers. But yeah, the no long range step route I think has a few less encounters, and then I think some of them are just faster. But yeah, it's a really cool speedrun. It's my favorite speedrun out of all the stuff I ran so far. It's definitely by far my favorite. It's the longest because I went from running an hour and 15-minute speedruns to 30-minute to 6-hour speedruns, but it's definitely my favorite by far. It's actually also funny because like I'm 26 years old, and I'm like one of the youngest in the community, because most people in the Final Fantasy community are in like their 30s, because all of them like grew up with the game, and here I am. I'm like 26 years old, but I'm one of the youngest, which is like crazy. So yeah, it's a very
oldest in my community, and I'm 25.
Oh yeah, because Mario has a lot of youngsters, right?
Yeah, and I'm half lying, but I guess as far as activity goes, it's true.
Yeah.
Moment, but
yeah,
it's like the complete opposite.
Yeah, isn't that so funny? Yeah, it's funny because like even like Spyro and Crash and stuff. I think Crash is like around my age, like because a lot of people that still do runs that are around like my age, like mid to late 20s. I think like Spyro recently. I haven't ran Spyro, but Spyro definitely has a much younger demographic, like probably like early 20s. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy when you see like different demographics in different speedrun communities. But definitely with Final Fantasy games, especially, it's like 30 plus. Like I'm like, because I was like asking people like, how old are you? How are you? 32, 33, 31. I'm like, oh, how old are you? At the time, I was like, oh, 24. Like, did you play this game as a kid? I'm like, no, like I didn't. But yeah, it's just funny. Yeah, it's just such a different demographic, but it's nice because it's like it's just way more there. Every speedrun community has drama, unfortunately, but there's way less drama in FF7, which I've noticed. Um, Everybody's very down to earth. The people that I have met in person have been amazing. I actually roomed with at AGDQ. I roomed with Ace Zephyr. He hasn't run the game, but he's like one of the smartest and most knowledgeable strat hunters and science people in FF7. That dude is like literally like he's one of the smartest people I've ever met. Honestly, he's just insane. Cool roommate too, and really good friend of mine. I would definitely, because some people, some people at like events like that, you room with them once and you're like, I don't know if I'd room with them again. And again, nothing personal. It just sometimes it just happens. But no, Ace, off topic, but like he was a really fun friend to room with, and really cool person. But yeah, I've met several FF7 runners. I met a few at ESA, which was awesome too. Because there are some FF runners that are in like Europe and stuff as well. But yeah, very cool community. It's my favorite speed. I'll be going back to it pretty soon. I'd say within like the next like week or so. I'm gonna start like actually like fully derusting. Because yeah, it's just a really cool run with a lot of RNG, a lot of skips, cool boss strategies. I wouldn't say it's accessible because it's a very long run, but I definitely recommend it if you want to run a 6.5 hour JRPG. But I understand people that don't. That's totally fine. Because yeah, it's long.
Well, I'll say the disc debacle is a very interesting story. You don't hear
Yeah.
that a lot. I'm so used to we usually like remove loading times. At least in the games I run, you remove the kind of loading times just to make sure
Right.
everything's easier to deal with playing field. But so
Mhm.
I've never had to deal with a run that doesn't do that. So it's interesting how that stuff is handled.
Yeah, that's the thing too, because I've noticed like with like load remover stuff and loading time removal, it's very like game by game basis of how it's
Mm-hmm.
handled.
Yeah.
Because like I know with like FDS games,
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely a big factor because obviously loading times could vary between. But do you guys allow like disk system versus EverDrive? Like, do you guys allow disk system for like the Mario Lost levels? Like,
Yeah,
how does
it's
that
really
work?
easy to remove loads because it's completely black screen in specific areas. So
Oh, okay.
you just frame delete there, and yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So that's how we deal with it. So there's like with loads, without loads on the leaderboard, but without loads is the accurate because like that's all the gameplay, I guess. Like
Okay.
that way loads won't affect your run because like in that case, like the original FDS is the slowest. It'd be faster to run on an EverDrive or something. And,
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
that
because
kind of.
EverDrive's slightly faster than
Yeah.
because Famicom Disk System has the moving belt and stuff inside. Yeah,
Hmm. I
yeah.
think it can even vary, not as much, but it might be able to like vary between like the FDS.
Oh
I could be making that up, but I thought so. So.
no, I think you're right because like the thing is with what's happened with some FF7 runners is if their PS2 lasers are starting to go out and they're during the disc swap will take like way longer.
Mm,
So I've seen some people they PV but they lose like 20 seconds on the disc swap because their laser's bad. Thankfully with the PS2 though, it's fairly easy to replace the laser. My PS2 has a brand new laser in it since like last year, so I'm not like worried about it. But that is the downside of running disc based speed runs
hmm.
is that like the inevitable of like your laser going out or whatever your disk drive failing. Again, thankfully with the PS2 at least the parts are very easy to come by because the PS2 is the best selling console of all time, and also
Yeah.
replacement parts are in very high supply. But like with other disc based consoles, it's kind of unfortunate because like how are they going to go about that? Well, emulator be optimal or whatever. I know, we talked about the PSIO earlier, but like, because like Sega Saturn, I have a Sega Saturn and it actually has a optical drive emulator. I have the Fenrir on that, which I removed the disk drive. But it's like with the Sega Saturn, you probably can't come by lasers or disk drives as easy as the PS2. So like, how do Sega Saturn speedruns? Do they allow those SD card readers, or what do they do for that? Because I'm grateful I run PS2 and PlayStation 1 speedruns where I don't really have to worry about the parts breaking down, because I can just get replacement parts really easily. But if I ran like a Dreamcast or something, what's the solution for that? So that's the big advantage that Nintendo runners have. Again, with cartridge-based media, there's no moving parts, and again with flash cards, you just have everything on one device and just boot up your practice. Okay, I'm done practicing. Reset, boot up the game. You're good to go. And it's just like you have everything all in one, but like it's just crazy. And then like also your stuff lasts longer too, because retro hardware and software and stuff, you want to make it last as long as you can. And in most cases, if you take care of your software and your consoles and stuff, most cases it'll outlive you. But when it comes to the actual like controllers and stuff too, that's the big thing. Like,
oh well, yeah, controllers.
Yeah, controllers are the biggest
frequently, but
yeah, controllers are the first things to go, because with speedrunning especially, you're constantly using them, constantly putting wear and tear on them. But again, I've even seen like Super Nintendo and Super Famicom controllers. They have like replacement rubber pads for the buttons and stuff. I'm just like,
I buy those all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine so, because you probably go through so many every few months, because you have to constantly shift. So do you guys have like I got a question for you. Do you guys have like a reliable like supplier of like those rubber pads, or?
There's a few. I don't know which one's the best or whatever. It's all like feel, and some can be different depending on your game, like if it's a D-pad heavy game or if it's an AB heavy game or whatever. But there's a nice Swedish supplier that's called like Japan Spell.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
That's where I got a lot of them. And then my most recent batch, someone recommended. I think I got it from Kurt's new brand, if you've heard of him.
Oh, cool.
So,
no, I haven't heard of that, but
yeah, those have been fine. They felt a little different, but I adjusted fairly well. And
right on.
Yeah, that's all I've ever used, I guess. So I can't speak more about that. I guess I don't know what the other ones feel like, but I know there's a ton of different suppliers or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny actually you say that. Here it is actually. My Super Nintendo controller, I have a Japan Spell pads inside them. I actually got these back in 2019. I don't really play my Super.
Oh, so those are those like the black rubbers? They had two different sets.
They're the silver, the clear ones, I think.
All right, well then never mind.
Yeah, because
there were Japan Spell had two sets of SNES controller rubbers, and everyone would always recommend this set. They've been sold out for like 5 years.
Oh, so the clear set.
You can, whatever you got, probably not. I think it was a black set.
Oh, the black set. Okay.
So I was only able to get the clear ones, and I don't like them. So
really,
yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, I've only played like Super Nintendo and Super Famicom stuff casually. Like I played a lot.
Casually, it's fine.
Yeah,
but...
yeah. But for like speedrun stuff, it's probably like for example, like Mario World or something with the D-pad.
Yeah, I like a little more firm and click, and at least the ones I got were a lot more loose and kind of hard to tell if you were pushing it down. So yeah.
Yeah. But
I don't SNES too much. So.
Yeah, you're more of an NES or Famicom guy. So. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, because I've had these since 2019. I actually have a backup set too. I haven't had to use them yet, but these like the buttons are still clicky, the D-pad's still really good, and yeah, because I played A Link to the Past recently for the first time. It was like I think back in early February, but yeah, it was a really good game. But yeah, no, I had no issues. But again, I'm not a SNES speedrunner.
Casually, I'm sure they're perfectly fine.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, no, with PlayStation stuff, it's just buying new controllers, unfortunately. Yeah. Thankfully, with FF7, the only really button that'll get worn out is the circle button, because with FF7, That's how you mash text, and usually how I do it is I do like a double thumb.
Oh yeah, you have no
Um,
auto. You have to just you gotta
yeah,
go for it.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so we do allow turbo, but it's on
Oh,
a
okay.
separate board. Yeah, so
Oh, okay. Yeah.
yeah, so turbo in the speedrunning community has been a very, you probably know it's a very divisive debate.
Yeah. I get it
Yeah,
for like JRPGs and whatever, like text
yeah,
based heavy, yeah. And I also like agree with the separation thing. I don't really care. I
yeah,
can't speak about it because I don't
yeah,
run games like that. But
yeah,
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 I understand how it's done.
yeah. So yeah, for it's funny. So because for for the PS1 Final Fantasy games, there's 7, 8, 9. They actually last year they now allow it for FF9. Like
Hmm.
not two separate boards, it's one board. It just has no turbo or turbo. So if you use turbo or not, you have to let them know. And with that community, I can't speak on behalf of it because like I don't run FF9, but I do know it was a very very divisive
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
debate. It got like very toxic from what I heard.
Mm.
And with FF7, at least I'm fortunate. For me personally, I'm kind of in the middle. I don't mind. I wouldn't mind personally if it's on the same board, but I would not use turbo. I like using no turbo because it's more legit.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me. But if you use turbo, that's awesome. I still think turbo's legit, but I think no turbo is just better because you actually have to put effort into mashing. That's just my opinion. But if it was on the same board, I wouldn't care. I don't care at all. If we had a vote today, I would vote combined because I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But with FF7, I'm kind of thankful we mostly don't want it combined because we don't have any drama. Because on occasion it'll get brought up, but it's just a universal no, 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 nope, don't combine it. So thankfully I'm like we don't have any drama regarding turbo. So, but if we were to one day combine it, I wouldn't care. I just wouldn't use turbo. I would use no turbo because I just like using no turbo. I have a turbo controller. I bought one in Japan actually, because there's some for the PlayStation speedruns, the RPGs. They're the best ones are called a Fujiwara Kiwami. They're like a third party, officially licensed controller, but they were only available in Japan. I actually found one at like a Japanese, like a small retro secondhand shop for like $10,
Hmm.
and it's like never been used. I was like,
Lucky find.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I might as well just buy it. Yeah, so I bought one in Japan, which was really cool. And yeah, I know in the Japanese community and a lot of I know the Japanese community, they're very pro turbo. Like with JRPG speedruns, especially with the Japanese boards for Final Fantasy, they're automatically allowed because Japanese runners they they want turbo, and I totally get it because for a JRPG speedrun, it's just a lot of it's just text boxes. You're not like doing anything with in battle that's gonna affect it. But like yeah, when it came to like if it came to like Ratchet and Clank, I would not want turbo in that game because there are one frame tricks in Ratchet and Clank, and
Yeah,
a
yeah.
turbo controller would just ruin like the skill for that. But like JRPG stuff,
Yeah,
I
it
don't
would
really
be a game
care.
by game kind of thing. It depends
Yeah,
on
that's how I
what
like
the
to look.
turbo is
Yeah,
doing for you, I guess.
yeah, because there was a debacle on Twitter, like I think either last year or 2022, and I didn't say anything about it because, in my opinion, and like you said, it's a game by game basis. You can't
Mm-hmm.
say they should be allowed for all speedruns. You have to take a game by game. Like JRPG, sure, because it's text box
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but like Ratchet
Yeah.
and Clank, no. Or
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Mario or something,
Yeah,
it's going
no.
to create that unfair advantage. But again, JRPGs, again, if we had a vote for Final Fantasy VII and they allowed it, I'd vote for it. And then
Mm-hmm.
if it was allowed, I would just still use no turbo. And the people that can use turbo can use turbo. That's awesome.
And even if it's combined, if you have that selection thing, you can choose in like the
Exactly.
filtering to like
Yeah.
do it that way too.
Yeah, exactly. You can still filter it how you want. But yeah, so yeah, turbo stuff. I'm for it, but also I like running no turbo. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of just in the middle for that debate. But yeah, thankfully though, like I said, I think the last time we had a vote, it was like 70% no, 30% yes. So the majority of FF7 runners are just like, no, don't combine it, and it's totally fair. So
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah,
Because either way, you can run it with or without. So
exactly. Yeah, and the thing is, even with the separate board, you still have that option, which is cool. You still have that competition. You still have that competitiveness, and you can still run the game how you want to run it,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
essentially. So
Yeah. I mean, and even if it was like banned or something, you can still do it. Like nothing's stopping you, right?
Exactly. Do the runs how you want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's what I say. So, is that every game you've run? It sounds like.
yeah, that those are all the games I've run, and then yeah, like, I have interest in maybe at learning a new speedrun this year. We'll see, but for now I'm gonna go back to FF7, run that for a little bit, and then yeah, sky's the limit. But yeah, I'm a big PlayStation speedrunner, as you can tell.
Yeah.
Um, I do watch like Mario runs. I do like watching Nintendo runs from time to time. Um, I'm definitely not anti Nintendo. I have Nintendo consoles. I have Pokemon plushies in the background. You can see I like Nintendo stuff as well. But when it comes to main games, I am a PlayStation guy. So yeah,
Yeah, that's
mainly a
good.
PlayStation speedrunner. Yeah.
So, for like future speedruns, do you have like ones on your mind, like anything like, oh, maybe, or you know?
Yeah, yeah. So I think like two. I have like my mind on. One of them is actually I may one day. And again, it's just whenever if I ever get to it.
Mm-hmm.
I have interest in maybe trying a Pokemon speedrun,
Ooh.
because it's that JRP. It scratches that JRPG itch that Final Fantasy does, but on
Mm-hmm.
top of Pokemon, it's way less time invested than Final Fantasy. Even
And you seem to be
the
a fan of the franchise. So.
yeah, and even the glitchless categories of Pokemon, they're like 2 or 3 hours. I'm just like, oh, that's like more than half less of FF7. Yeah, so I have looked at like Pokemon runs, um, mainly like the GBA or the DS ones because they do have like manipulations they do like they're similar to FF7. But they work a little bit differently with encounters, with like getting no encounters. On top of like having that GRPG, scratching that GRPG itch, the RNG, the execution, they do look like really cool runs. Um, they do look really, they look really cool overall. Again, will I ever get to it? Maybe we'll see. I'll have to figure that out once I feel like maybe trying something new. Um, and then I'd say the other game, and probably not this, but like maybe eventually the Final Fantasy like the 7 remake games.
Mm.
I don't know. That's probably. I'd say probably right now it's like 5% chance. It looks cool because I actually did look at like strat videos last night of like the fights and stuff because the remake games are not like the original games because the original games are turn based. The remake games are like action based, so it's like
Mm.
action combat. It's like Kingdom Hearts. It's like the best way to compare it. They're way different, but they do look really cool. I wouldn't say I'm like, oh my god, I'll run that someday. It's just like it looks cool. There's a 5% chance maybe I'll get interest enough to run it, but I'd say the game I have more interest in running someday is probably a Pokemon game. Um, in the future, like in the future, PlayStation stuff. I can't think of anything right now. I definitely would like to go back to Ratchet and Klonoa before I run anything more PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
Just improve those runs, per se. But yeah, in terms of new stuff I'd like to run in the future, maybe a Pokemon game. Like that's definitely what I would more than like most likely gravitate towards in the future.
Yeah. Do you know which one you'd be most interested in?
Yeah, I was looking at either the Heart Gold and Soul Silver glitchless run or the Emerald glitchless run. Because both I love both those games and both routes look really cool. The thing that sucks about if I were to run Heart Gold and Soul Silver is that I'd have to get like a DS capture card and shit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and like, I mean I have a DS that's compatible with it, but I'd have to get all that, and then I'd have to also because what's nice about if I were to run Emerald is you can play that on the GameCube and I can use that on my monitor and then like, see it on a big screen.
You got
And
the Game Boy player.
yeah, I have the Game Boy. Yeah, I have the Game Boy player and then the GBI, the Game Boy interface, the homebrew version that they all use for speedrunning.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have the RetroTink, so I can upscale it to through S video and stuff, and it'll look really good. And
Oh yeah.
but then yeah, then also I don't have to buy anything else if I were to run Emerald. I have Emerald, I have GameCube, I have everything I need. I don't have to buy a capture card and all that stuff, and then have to rely on like what if the DS breaks in a few because that's the thing that's but again maybe I'll get past that because that's the thing that with running those DS games is you have to rely on your console and a capture card so if it broke but I don't see unless you like handled it with like the worst care but like there is that that worry I have. Oh, what if it just randomly broke and then I'd have to get another DS capture card. But like with a
I get
GameCube,
it,
it's
yeah.
like with a GameCube at the very least. Also, they have those SD card mods you can get that don't even remove the disk drive, which I just do that. And um, I think I actually put myself on a waiting list. There's a new GameCube SD card optical drive emulator mod that's coming out. It's called Cube Boot, and it actually isn't going to remove the disk drive, that's like
Oh,
for
so
me that's like a
it's like a flash card for GameCube,
yeah.
almost. Okay.
It's also solderless, and
Ooh.
apparently it's super easy to install. They haven't released a production batch yet, but there was a wait list that I put myself on, and it's only
Okay.
going to be like $40. $40 for a GameCube SD card mod, which I'm like, that's
This is
awesome
great
because then
because I don't have a GameCube yet. I was waiting for something like
yeah.
this. So okay,
Yeah,
okay.
look up Cube. I can maybe even like send you the Twitter account Cube. I think it's called a Cube Boot. Um,
Yeah,
Macho
I'll add that to
Nacho.
my like info list I keep track of for like future
Yeah, yeah,
purchases. Okay.
yeah. There's a good video on YouTube. Macho Nacho. He does a lot of retro game content. He's a really good channel. He got a prototype of it like a few months back. He did a really good video on it. It is a really really cool optical drive emulator because the disc menu, like the game menu, loads from the GameCube BIOS, and the game selection screen, it has like the memory card icons. It's so cool.
Ah, so
Um,
it like
yeah,
fully mimics what you expect, but
yeah,
yeah, okay. Wow.
yeah. And then to boot into the normal GameCube BIOS to play your disc-based stuff, I think you just hold like buttons on the controller, and then you can just play your discs. It's awesome.
Well,
So yeah,
damn.
I would, yeah.
Wow.
And that's the thing, yeah, because then with those SD card solutions, you can boot into the Game Boy interface without the boot disc, and it makes it
Oh
way easier.
shit. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that would
yeah,
solve because that disc is hard to find, the Game Boy player
yeah. I
thing.
don't have I don't have the disc. So the current way I boot into the Game Boy player is I do the 007 hack where I have like a hacked memory card. You boot into some like I think the options menu of the 007 Agent Under Fire, and it just boots into the Game Boy player. But obviously I don't
Okay.
want to have to do that because then
Yeah.
yeah, it's just complicated. It costs like all that stuff costs me like a few bucks, but the Cube boot at least will be able to do it literally from the menu, and then I can just
Yeah,
boot into
that's sick.
yeah,
That sounds like an EverDrive for the GameCube.
yeah, yeah.
Pretty
And then
much, so.
the best part is you get to keep the disk drive because
Hmm.
I like to keep the disk drive when I can,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
because I like the option to play the physical media as well. So yeah, and yeah, like I said, I don't know if the price will change, but when they announced the waiting list, they said it was going to be like $40. I'm just like, I'm getting that. Like I
Well,
put myself on the wait list. Yeah,
I am writing that down after this. That is
yeah,
great
it's a good
information
idea. Yeah, it's
because
a good idea.
that's like because the Wii, it's super easy to like you can load games on Wii off your SD card now.
Yeah,
And that, oh my god, I love that.
yeah.
So the Wii's figured out. uh, I haven't touched my Switch yet. I probably won't for a while, but that would be
Mhm.
every Nintendo console, pretty much like
Yep.
having a kind of a flash cart kind of way, just having the way to play the original media intact, but being able to load everything in one easy, convenient area.
Yep.
That would complete the lineup. So that's really cool.
Yep. Yeah, it's because they do have like there's several options for the GameCube. There's like the M2. There's also like Pico Boot, which is like uses like a Raspberry Pi,
Hmm.
and then there's the GC Loader, which those are one really hard to get, and then two they removed the disk drive. So like
Yeah, yeah. No.
I didn't really want to get another ODE that removes the disk drive.
Yeah,
But then I saw like
it's
yeah
great
they were
for.
working.
Sorry, I'm gonna interrupt.
Oh no, you're good. No, go ahead.
It's great for both the casual and the speedrunner thing because
Mhm.
usually with a booter like that you can't do that for speedruns because it'll have some sort of issue. So you can do it for casual and then still
Mhm.
have the disc available for a potential speedrun thing. So
Yep.
you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and then the greatest strength of those for me at least is being able to play those like rare and expensive games that you don't want to put
Oh
money
yeah, of
down.
course.
Like for example, like the GameCube has like Cubivore, which is like a several $100 game, and you don't have to drop all that money to get a disc copy. You can just get a you can legally obtain a digital copy.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, legally obtain a digital copy from a friend that burns the disc, and then you put it on the SD card, and then and you're good to go. So like you said, the benefits for those EverDrive like solutions for disc-based consoles definitely are good for both the casual and the speedrunner, because you get everything. So I definitely, when they haven't emailed me yet, but when they do announce the production batch, I will definitely be getting one and installing it on my GameCube, because then I can actually have a good SD card solution for my GameCube, and then I can also sell my 007 disc, because the only reason why I have that game is because of
the Game Boy boot thing.
The Game Boy, the Game Boy player, the exploit. So I can sell that game, and because I don't play it. And then just, I mean, with GameCube in general, that's like probably the console I care the least about physical media, but I do still have a few GameCube games, and I still would like to have the option to play the disc, because again, physical media forever. So
I get it. But that's awesome information. So and it sounds like by the time I would ever eventually get a GameCube, because again, the only reason I really want it is for the Game Boy player, because I mean that's like a super useful thing to have. I play my Game Boy off the Super Game Boy too. The SD to SNES actually does. You can just load a Game Boy ROM and it acts like you have a Super Game Boy 2, which is super cool.
I've seen that too.
But obviously that can't do color or advance, so that's why you get the player. And that would just that would be perfect. That's just that's it. That's what you need. So good information. Again, definitely writing that down, because that sounds perfect. And and again, what I was gonna say is, it sounds like by the time I eventually get a GameCube, that would be out by then, because it probably wouldn't be for a while. So perfect.
For sure.
Well, awesome. I see. This is why I do this. I learned so many good things about what to do with the retro stuff. But I mean, I think we went over everything. Talked about like all your speed runs, event runs, any other tangents we went over. I mean, is there anything important that we didn't go over that you'd like to bring up?
I don't think so, man. I mean, no, I think I might basically over all of my history so far, and what's to come and stuff. But no, this was a lot of fun. I haven't done a podcast like this in so long. But again, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to have me on. Shout out to whoever's watching also. This was a lot of fun. I like talking about speedrun stuff. I like talking about retro games, retro game solutions, etc. I like talking about all this stuff. I can literally talk about this for hours, but I guess I'll do some shout outs. I guess shout outs to all my friends in the speedrun community, all the communities I've been a part of, all the communities I'm still a part of, everybody that I'm friends with. Everybody's awesome. Much love. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is an amazing game. If you have a PS5, play it. But yeah, no, I really, really appreciate you having me on here. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got to talk about a lot of different things, and I'm glad I got to pass some very, very useful information on to you as well, man.
Yeah, I mean, I've been waiting for something like that for GameCube before I made any decisions, so that sounds perfect for what I need. So
hell yeah,
very cool. But yeah, I learned a lot about PlayStation runs. I mean, again, the whole disc debacle, I'll call it. It's so like, nothing to like a normal person, but understanding the context behind speedrunning, it's like, that's actually super interesting. So and you wouldn't really hear that anywhere else, I guess. So just it's very funny how things work out.
Yeah, it's crazy, honestly, but at least we figured it out instead of still scratching our heads over like what was the cause. But at least we figured it out, and like I said, there seems to be a pretty good supply of these Sonic discs out there, and you can easily find them. So it's not like there's some huge barrier to entry. And the thing is, even I didn't even mention this before, but you don't need them, because you can. It's only a little over a minute, but they do help. You don't need them, but they help. So,
hopefully I'll use this someday. Seems to be in good working order from what I've tested.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, PlayStations are, for the most part, PlayStations are pretty good as long as it's not like, I think the 1000 series is like the worst one, because the 1000 series, the laser, it's the
It has
1000
skipping
series.
issues.
What, yours or the 1000?
The one you were talking about, I think.
Yeah. So the 1000, the reason why that happens is because the rail that the laser's on, they made it out of plastic for the 1000 series, and so since it's so close to the power supply, it just eventually melts
Oh
and
my
just
God.
eventually just slowly degrade. Yeah, so the 1000 series, that's the best. That's like that's a good optimal console to get an X station for, because
Mhm.
you can give the console new life. But if you want to have like a disc-based console, usually ones after that, probably like 50, like the 55s or above, or even 5000s or above. Those are usually the better ones to have the
Yeah.
disc functionality, because
I've got a.
yeah.
If it'll focus, probably not, but oh, there we go. I have a 7501, which I think is the
Oh,
latest US PlayStation 1 release that still had the parallel port for the PSIO. So
yeah,
that's why I
think
picked this up.
yeah, and that one might also be X Station compatible. The
Yeah, but
7501,
I'd want to keep the disc drive, of course.
yeah, that's the thing. You want to keep the disc drive, but if they do come out in the future with the X Station disc, I guess keeping the disc version,
Yeah.
you can have that option as well. Because yeah, I eventually, if they did come out with an ODE for PlayStation 1 that kept the disc drive, I'd keep the one I have now, but I would probably get another PlayStation 1 and then get the one that can keep the disc drive, because keeping that functionality is definitely better than not. So
Yes, for sure.
yeah.
But yeah, thanks for being on. You can self-promote yourself if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, appreciate you having me on here. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad I got to be on here. This is a super awesome opportunity. Yeah, so you can find me at DylWingo, DylWingo, twitch.tv/DylWingo. It's also my Twitter account. And yeah, I'll be live with FF7 probably soon, with FF7 speedruns. So if you want to watch, if you want to put something on while you go to bed, because it's like a long run. I usually do runs Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Not really during the work week, but usually Friday, Saturday, and Sunday I'll do runs. But yeah, if you want to watch FF7, I'll be doing that soon. If you want to watch PlayStation stuff, I'll be there. But yeah, thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yep, and you can find all those links on screen right now or in the description on YouTube.
Awesome.
And there they will be. And then you can also find my stuff there too if you care. But
Hell yeah.
I guess we'll wrap things up here. Thanks for watching, everyone, and yeah, stay tuned for next week.
See you guys.
Bye.